This is my channel's monthly compendium for the month of April 2023.
Bonus incredible file, written by Snoo61002. Chronicles of a Demonologist and a Church Chaplain. Peace be upon you. I've been asked many times now, in response in conversations here, to share my experiences as an Order of St. John Chaplain and Demonologist. It's hard to know where to start, to be honest, but the most important thing I think is to say that these are my beliefs and experiences. I certainly don't begrudge you yours, and definitely don't want to assert any kind of authority over the beliefs of others. As chaplains, we are not positioned within a church because we minister to communities. It is not our place to judge any member of that community, but only to care for and support them in their needs. Also, rule number 1 of the job is to disprove, and disprove again. Here are a few experiences, some insight into our processes, what I'm allowed to speak to, how I got into the field, and then the training I undertook. Experiences. General and passive paranormal experiences are part and parcel of the job. I'll touch on it more later, but I'm not afraid of things that go bump in the night. I used to be, but once you've studied and understand it, the paranormal loses its excitement and becomes more of a puzzle that needs to be solved. My passive experiences are things like every month or so, I'll have a new knocking on our doors and windows, even though we live in a secure 3rd-floor apartment. I get random prods and pokes when I'm by myself. Whispering, murmuring, growling, scratching, electrical interference, random myths, distorted shadows, and shadow figures here and there. This has all become a weekly occurrence, although when I say that, it's usually just one of these things that happen. I deal with it, and then it goes away almost immediately. The hitchhiker. This is probably my most fascinating one, because it's a recurring event that happens every couple of months, and I haven't yet solved the puzzle. I travel a lot for my role. At the moment, I've been sent to one of our small towns to train people, run mental health programs, or help with large-scale crisis responses. This results in my driving for long hours, sometimes during the day and sometimes at night. I will see the same stocky, hitchhiking figure walking along the side of the road in a black hoodie and jeans, with hood up and thumb out. I've never stopped, and he's never turned around when I've approached. I've seen him at every point in the day, at dawn, during the day, dusk, night. I've seen him in locations several hours drive from each location. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but hitchhiking is really uncommon in our country. We're small and buses are cheap. Howling. This is another recurring one, although it's newer. It's more annoying than anything else, to be honest, but several times my partner and I have been woken to a long howl in our bedroom. The windows are closed, apartment units like I said, but it's ruining my sleep and I really enjoy my sleep. Cloaked figure. This is one that I've thankfully resolved, but had to deal with over a series of years. To cut a long story short, whenever I was in the middle of a really tough case supporting someone in what we call spiritual warfare, I'd get a visit from whatever this was. It was the same every time, where I would have a dream of a cloaked figure, wake up to a spinning room, and be choking. I've had sleep paralysis episodes before, but this was certainly different. I'm still half convinced this was some kind of sleep apnea issue or episode. The only thing that makes me think it was paranormal is because it happened without fail when I dreamt of this figure, and it stopped after I put some intentional work into stopping it. There are experiences of clients that I cannot share because I've made a strict confidentiality agreement with them, and that rests on my soul. But generally speaking, I've helped people deal with their psychological issues more than spiritual ones. Some spiritual ones have been fascinating, and there's a feeling I get when there's a really obvious sign of oppression or infestation. It's like a heavy feeling in my chest and stuffy air. I've helped people by blessing their houses, which is a complicated process and, depending on your beliefs, can be somewhat risky. You essentially have to call forth the oppressing force, challenge it, rebuke it, and either condemn it or suppress it, if it can't be dealt with in one blessing. I've also helped people with deliverance, although I'm not big on the evangelical deliverance ministry. We're more of a traditional denomination, but I've never helped with an exorcism. I'm still relatively young for my role, and while I am a commissioned member of the order, I'm not yet a fully ordained minister. Processes. We have to be careful with what we share, and that's for a really inane reason. We often get people who either want to play a prank or desperately want something paranormal to be happening. And the information we don't share is essentially the key information we need while triaging our cases. What I can say is how we view the paranormal is unusual. Anything paranormal, by our theology, is demonological, angelic, or the Holy Spirit. When it comes to things that we humans get scared of, we're hardwired to be scared of the paranormal if we believe in it. It's a non-interactable nocturnal threat, and we are diurnal creatures. It's really easy to trigger our limbic system. However, and again, just my view, I see paranormal activity as parlor tricks of a damned and jealous entity. But I have the power to send it back where it belongs, and it knows that, so it will struggle however it can. It will try to scare me because it is scared of me, and it should be. I'm there to do a job. It's like spiritual pest extermination, but a moving cup, whispering, growling, etc., is nowhere as scary to me as, say, driving in heavy rain, or the things I dealt with as a bouncer while I studied. Humans, dogs, even cats are more dangerous than most hauntings or paranormal experiences. One exception is that possession is incredibly dangerous, but intensely rare. I'm not scared of these things, not because I'm tough or brave, but because they're not actually dangerous, and they need to be condemned. That being said, if we go through an intensive investigatory process, it looks like this. We are a medical order. We're the Knights Hospitaller. We're also an indigenously focused arm of the order, and our indigeneity gives us a different worldview. When we assess a person, we don't just look at their spiritual health. We look at their social, physical, and psychological health as well. The first thing we will do, fully funded, is have the person see a doctor and a psychologist for assessment. This isn't because we think they're crazy, it's because we're building a comprehensive profile for exactly what we're dealing with. If someone is positive for physical or mental health issues that could be causing symptoms that they believe are spiritual, we need to treat those issues and see if the symptoms go away. Our church fully covers any costs associated with this process. If that doesn't solve the problem, my job is to definitively disprove the existence of paranormal activity or presences, but do so while believing there may well be a presence. Skepticism is a good thing most of the time, but it's sometimes bad. We're not there to assume the issue is mundane. We take all the information we can, assess it, and arrive at the likely outcomes, and we consider spiritual outcomes to be similarly as likely as mundane ones. However, we still need to disprove all of the mundane theories we can. But there's another layer. We also need to prove all of the mundane theories. This helps us have equality of information, so we won't be happy to say, oh, it's probably just this mundane thing, unless we can prove that. After this, if there is persistence of a spiritual issue, we begin our church-sanctified processes of blessings and protections for the affected individual. These interventions vary in intensity depending on the person, their faith relationship, and the persistence of whatever we're dealing with. How I got into the field. I didn't take a standard pathway. A standard pathway is that you attend a church that believes in demonological study, get as involved as possible with whatever you can, talk to the pastor about your desire to study, and follow this pathway, and see if the church will support you. It's a long pathway though. You can also try to become a lay chaplain for certain denominations, but honestly, the best thing you can do is wholeheartedly commit to a church, show them you're willing, and they'll support your journey. My pathway was that I studied a youth psych degree and specialized in youth gangs. Then a church was investing into the community and looking for a Christian with my expertise to be their youth pastor. I worked there for some time, and after a bit of a journey, came back to my home denomination, and that's who I work for now. I got a master's in professional practice, chaplaincy, and a diploma in demonology. But my psychology knowledge is what sets me apart from this ministry in the eyes of the church. I'm much more equipped to do a referral assessment than many of the clergy or congregation. My training in demonology comes from several sources. I completed the diploma at Bible College, but I've also done a small amount of training under a course from Bishop James Long. I did the Paranormal Academy of the United Kingdom online course because it's non-Christian, and I trained under our Archbishop for some time to specifically respond to the needs of the community in this regard. As a chaplain, this calling fit under my purview in his eyes. When I need to escalate church involvement, I can go straight to him. He taught me our beliefs, blessings, the processes of the church, etc. He also taught me our church's stance on demonology, which is old school. We're Anglican. King James was a demonologist, so it's a particular field for us. That's pretty much it. I'm always open to helping people on here, so if you have trouble, please just reach out through a message. I'm also happy to answer questions and engage in discourse, although I'm not going to be entirely engaging in what-ifs from the stories. For me, it's almost impossible to prove the paranormal online due to the nature of evidence and how easily it can be faked, so I'm not going to go into that, and I've peer-reviewed these things with my colleagues.
Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories.
Case file number 1037, written by Blah Blah Bay, The Chicken Pad Thai Enigma. Preface. No drugs were involved, and no history of schizophrenia, psychosis, etc. I want to add that this happened while I was laid off, and not long after, I also received a job offer using the same technique, a 55% raise over my last role, which was well paying to begin with. Okay, so let's get into it now, guys. So the story might be the definition of fluck around and find out. Long story short, I started tampering with the law of assumption a few months ago. If you're not familiar with it, the long and short of it is it's a specific manifestation technique. Anyway, there was one particular experiment I did that left me in shock for days, based on chicken pad thai. This story goes back to early December last year. I was craving chicken pad thai one day and decided, you know what, let me try to do this with pad thai and prove that I can be specific. The intention behind this wasn't to get free pad thai, but to prove something unequivocally to myself. Choosing something trivial was just to make it easier. So I got to work with visualization, and a few days later, some friends invited me over for dinner. They made orange chicken and rice, and I told the universe, or me, okay, close, but no, I want chicken pad thai. I go back to the drawing board and pinpoint what I needed to change. This time I focused on seeing the noodles, scallions, the cashews, the chicken, and imagined the taste as best as I could. I even imagined the place and manner in which it might happen, and then I just dropped it. Fast forward a couple days. I was out doing Uber Eats for a bit, and just as I was about to head home, I got an order from this place I'd occasionally go to, but not often, and where I had gotten to know some of the guys. On my way, I think, man, I'm so hungry. I hope they give me free food. Mind you, they had never given me free food up to that point. Also, they had zero knowledge that chicken pad thai is my favorite dish. They're also a storefront for 5 other virtual restaurants. Chinese food is their main one, then Vietnamese, Japanese, Thai, wings, and the other one that I can't recall. Meaning the menu options were at least 50 plus. Anyway, I pull up, and one of the guys I know is there, and he says, "Are you hungry?" And I go, "Ugh, yes, starved." And he goes, "I saved something. Been waiting all day to give it to someone special. Do you like chicken fried rice?" I love chicken fried rice. So it's established that it's chicken fried rice, allegedly. We chat a bit, and I leave with my free food thinking, okay, not pad thai, but I'm still grateful. Pretty cool. I'm mulling it over in my head while driving, and pulling over for my next pickup. As I'm sitting in my car, I glance over at the box and think, what if it's somehow chicken pad thai? For some reason, I suddenly got nervous and approached the box with trepidation. As I'm unpacking it, I stop cold when I have cracked it just enough to peek inside. You guys, I kid you not, inside was chicken pad thai. My jaw dropped and I was pretty sure I stopped breathing for a bit. And as all this is happening, some random guy comes up to my window asking for my number too. "Excuse me, sir, but I'm a little busy having a meltdown right now." Anyway, it was so overwhelming that I bawled afterwards and went on a very long drive that night. So it begs the question, what came first? The chicken fried rice or the chicken pad thai? Was it always chicken pad thai? Or did I jump into a reality halfway through where it changed? As ridiculous as it sounds, this little bit of flukkery is what made me start exploring the possibility of parallel dimensions. Would love to hear your thoughts. Case file number 1038, written by Cody Wumple, The Infinite Cookie Glitch. Because it's always good to clarify, I was in no way, shape, or form intoxicated, lacking sleep, or any state that can alter one's perception. This happened today. It is in the middle of the afternoon and it is my break, so I decided to grab a snack. I made some cookies the day before and took 4 of those to university because I know having a snack helps me get through the long afternoons. I go sit down in a corner to watch some silly YouTube videos. I grab a cookie and eat it. Then another, then that's right, another. I'm not really paying attention to the Tupperware as I'm grabbing the cookies at this point. I am focused on the video. I grab and eat another cookie, and another one. Then it hits me. There were only 4 cookies in my Tupperware. I know this because I packed them this morning, and this is the maximum amount that I allow myself. I finally look, and there's still 2 cookies sitting there. 2 out of 4, and I've eaten 6 already. The moment I finally look at the box while finishing them up, they of course actually disappear and do not make a reappearance. It honestly sounds like one of those infinity glitches from video games. I pondered on it all day and have decided to take it as a universe kindly granting me more snacks to help with this particularly long day of class. The cookies did not disappear literally as I watched them. They disappeared in my stomach as I ate them, and did not duplicate. Case file number 1039, written by Stu for You. Atlantis is a mythical place. So this glitch I witnessed happened in June 2022, when I was on a work trip. It still bothers me and makes me question it to this day. I work as a private stewardess on board a motor yacht. This job requires me to travel very often, so I spend a lot of time at Atlantis Resort on Paradise Island in the Bahamas. One day when I was off, my crew and I decided to go to the beach that is part of the Atlantis Resort. Only people staying at the hotel or marina can access it. It was myself and 2 of my other crewmates who decided to go. Our boat was docked in the Marina Village, part of the resort, but the beach was about a 20-minute power walk through the hotel casino and breezeways. So we left the boat, and the first place we had to walk through was the casino. Mind you, there were a lot of stairs to climb just to get into it, probably about 50, and many other stairs throughout the walk. These 2 crewmates are good friends of mine, and we're always talking and making jokes with each other. We talked pretty much the entire walk. As we're walking through the casino, I notice a lady maybe in her mid-30s standing near a machine with a stroller, digging through her purse looking for something. She stood out to me because I really liked the athletic dress and gym shoes she was wearing, although I usually like a lot of people's outfits, so it wasn't a weird thing for me to notice. I didn't feel the need to point her out to my crewmates because they were both guys and wouldn't appreciate her outfit as much as I did. The 3 of us continue walking at a swift pace through the casino, the lobby, and the outside breezeway paths, many random stairs. Eventually, after a solid 15 minutes of walking, we approached the kids' arcade and daycare center, and as we walked past it, I was shook. The woman in the athletic dress and stroller was in front of us, waiting in line at the daycare, as if she had been standing there for a bit. In my mind, I thought there's no way she could have gotten there before we did. There's just no way. There are way too many stairs for her to have done it by herself, especially with a stroller and a small child in it. What gets me is that it seemed as if she was standing there waiting for a bit. I thought about when we walked past her in the casino, she was rummaging through her purse looking for her phone or something, and had no intentions of leaving right after we passed. I didn't say anything to my crewmates when we walked past her, because I was making sure it was definitely her. As soon as we walked past, one of my crew members went, "Is it just me, or was she in the casino when we left?" I couldn't be happier when he said that because it was confirmation that I wasn't the only one who witnessed this. He and I both noticed her and thought the exact same reasonings as to how it would have been impossible for her to have beat us here. It was a really strange coincidence, and I just do not think she could have walked faster than the 3 of us, especially with a stroller to push and carry up and down the stairs. Since we spend so much time at Atlantis, we are for sure certain that the way we walked is the fastest way to get there. If there were any shortcuts, we would know about them. He and I still talk about how weird that encounter was. The whole time we were at the beach, we were discussing how the only logical explanation was that it had to be a glitch in the Matrix. Anyone else experienced this or something similar? It bothers me so much and I need to know the truth. Case file number 1040, written by Tainted Grey, When Time is Not Linear. This happened about 16 years ago, and I still don't know how to wrap my head around it. So my friend and I were sitting on my brother's bed watching TV, just chatting and hanging out. My brother had a box of metal BB pellets on the bed that we didn't bother moving because he had his stuff everywhere. While we were hanging out, my big German Shepherd Guinness came running into the room playfully and jumped onto the bed, causing the box of BB pellets to flip over and scatter everywhere. I still remember the sound of them hitting the hardwood floor. However, as this was happening, it was as though time reversed, literally rewound, and my dog ended up back on the floor as if he jumped down backwards, and all the BB pellets reversed back into the box. Even Guinness had a look of confusion on his face and he ran out of the room. When we looked down, there was absolutely no pellets on the ground, and the box was closed and secure on the bed. My friend also remembers this in vivid detail. Otherwise, I would probably convince myself it was a weird dream, but we both experienced it and remember it all these years later. We were probably 13-ish at the time. Anyone else ever experienced something like this? Case file number 1041, written by Sparkle Cheetah, My Multiversal Genes. As a Floridian, it's hot as fuck here, so I was moving my winter wardrobe into the boxes where my spring and summer clothes live for the winter. I usually go through my closet a few times a year, and it was time for a day of reorganizing. Long story short, I was refolding my stack of jeans. I own about 8 pairs of jeans, and noticed a pair that I had literally never seen before in my life. I know every pair of jeans I own in great detail. I didn't own a really good pair of jeans for the past 6 or 7 years, so I spent the last 2 or 3 years purchasing great jeans. This pair was a dark wash, size 2, extra long length, bootcut mini flares from Zara. Every time I looked in my closet, I saw these jeans and assumed they were the pair of size 3, extra length, dark wash bootcut mini flare jeans I had from American Eagle. I could tell the cut of them, although the same, were very obviously different. I even remember I purchased the American Eagle jeans on sale, BOGO half off, with a pair of distressed skinny jeans. Like I said, I know my jeans and their silhouette very well. The American Eagle jeans weren't denim, so I really never liked the stretchy material and never wore them. Anyways, I went to refold my jeans to make them look nice, and when I held these up, for some reason I stopped breathing. I've never seen these before. The length of the Zara jeans is also a few inches longer than the American Eagle jeans. They were folded in the exact same way I folded all my pants and were in the same place in the stack that the American Eagle jeans were always in, third from the bottom. Am I just losing my mind? As silly and small as it sounds, I just can't stop thinking about it all. Case file number 1042, written by Silas Here. My daughter and I, Lords of Spacetime. My daughter and I went to Albuquerque for a conference a few years ago. I was trying to find a place to eat dinner. There was tons of traffic and road construction, really frustrating driving conditions. I had the GPS going finally to a restaurant, and we were starving, so we constantly were checking the ETA, like 15 more minutes to dinner. Anyways, at around 5 minutes till we were due to arrive, I was driving over a bridge area. Traffic was still very heavy. I glanced quickly at the GPS, and it was spinning. I told my daughter, "Look." She saw it spin, looked back at traffic. Only a second had passed, but was now 30 minutes from the restaurant. The car going another way, and no sign of the bridge anywhere. I'm freaked out any time I think of this, and my daughter remembers it the same. When we hear a strange story, one of us will say, "Like that time we teleported." I don't know what to make of it, but we were not too happy about the extra time to get to the restaurant. Creepy file number 86, written by M. Somerville J., room 1709. It was April of 2008. I was 20 and living in Denver for a year-long contract with a non-profit in Boulder. My girlfriend, now wife, and my best friend Tim drove to Colorado from our home state to visit me for my 21st birthday. The non-profit I was working for housed their workers in dorm rooms and drinking was not allowed on site, nor were visitors allowed to stay overnight. So, I booked a hotel room in downtown Denver for the weekend, where we could drink in honor of my 21st. The hotel was big, very nice, and in a safe, central area of the city. So nice, in fact, that it was the same hotel that most of the politicians would later stay at during the DNC convention of '08 that took place in Denver later that summer. My wife and Tim arrived Saturday morning, and we all met up at the hotel. The day was fantastic. We drank across the city most of the day. By about 1 a.m., we got back to the hotel. The room was typical with 2 queen beds. Bed number 1 was close to a big window looking out across the city. Bed number 2 was pushed against the wall with a door that opened to the bathroom. You couldn't see the door entryway to our room unless you were at the foot of bed number 1. We drank more and chatted in the room until about 4 a.m. My wife was laying at the head of bed number 2, flipping through the TV. Tim and I were seated at the foot of bed number 1, staring out of the window as we talked. While chit-chatting, I heard some movement and the sound of a door opening. Without looking away from the window, I assumed it was my wife getting up to use the bathroom. A few minutes passed by, and I thought I heard movement again, so I finally turned around to look. I saw my wife still lounging in bed number 2 as she had been before. "Did you get up a few minutes ago and use the bathroom?" I asked her. "No," she replied. "I thought I heard a door," I said back to her, with her looking confused back at me. "Yeah, I thought I heard that too," Tim said, breaking his own gaze from the window. It was then I started to run cold and sobered up pretty quickly. Very softly I heard Tim say, "I think there's someone in our room." I lurched forward from the foot of the bed to look into the pitch-black entryway. I could barely make it out, and I wanted to believe I wasn't seeing it. But there was a man dressed in all black, with a black baseball cap pressed into the 90-degree corner of the entryway where the room door and wall met. Absolute silence fell on the room, and it felt like hours passed by as I started to panic in my mind like no way I ever have in my entire life. We all knew. We knew we weren't alone and hadn't been for a while, and he knew we spotted him. Eventually, Tim got the courage to meekly speak in the direction of the entryway and said, "Hey, man, is there something we can help you with?" Another period of silence that felt like an eternity went by. He slumped off the edge of the wall a little, into the light, and made eye contact with Tim and I. We all just stared at each other. Then eventually, he spoke up and said, "Is this room 1709? "No, man, it's not," Tim said, stroking his beard nervously. He stared at us for a while longer, raising his eyebrows and shaking his head. He then turned around and left. We then erupted into a million curse words and paced around the room. I called the front desk. They told me that he was drunk and they found him in the stairwell, but directed him back to the right room. Minutes later, Tim called the front desk and they told him he was not a guest. He was apprehended in the stairwell and taken into police custody. Then a while later, they told my wife he disappeared and they had no idea who he was or what he was doing. They told her there wasn't even a room 1709 in the hotel. We got 3 different stories. We still have no idea what that was all about, or how he managed to get a keycard to our room. We were sure the door was closed. It was easily the most terrifying moment of my life. Always use the latch in the hotel rooms. We got the stay refunded and about $200 in credit for food from the hotel. We should have sued, but we were young and dumb. Case file number 1043, written by Montfar, The Black Triangle Encounter. I encountered a black triangle UFO just a little over 20 years ago. Myself and 3 of my friends were all sitting in my backyard on my picnic table, the top of it so we were all facing the same way, looking up at the clear night sky one evening in the small town we lived in. We had just left the bar and were chatting about our night and smoking plants when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we saw something really big, all black, triangle in shape, with no lights whatsoever on it, appear in the night sky. It was a split second that we all saw it move from one end of the sky to the other, and it covered the stars as it did this. It was that massive. Easily the size of a football field, no joke. All of us just looked at each other and exclaimed at the same time, "Holy shiznit, did you just see that?" It was insane. I'll never forget it. Then, a few weeks after the incident, I had a very vivid dream that I was on a very cold operating table with what I could only sense as beings that were not human, and they were tickling me each time they touched me, almost like a faint electrical current. There were more than one touching me in different places all at one time. It was weird because I could feel their physical touches while asleep, like I was actually there. I wasn't able to see anything while this was going on. I'm pretty sure I had something over my face, so I couldn't see them or anything around me. However, I didn't feel threatened or scared by them at all. The dream ended abruptly, and I woke up in my bed. It seemed so real to me, and to this day I fully believe I was abducted while asleep, so they could study me. I have not seen the black triangle in the sky since, or had any more alien abduction dreams, thankfully. But it was definitely one of the strangest occurrences for me to date. Has anyone else had a similar encounter? Case file number 1044, written by Kinematic Co., Schrödinger's elevator. I live on the 15th floor of a condo. One day, my family was taking one of the 3 elevators to the ground, first floor. On the way down, the elevator stopped on the 4th floor and the doors opened to a mother and her son. This was during the pandemic where people didn't share elevators, so they said they would get on the next one. The doors proceeded to close, and the elevator goes straight to the ground floor with no other stops, which takes about maybe 5 seconds to reach the ground floor from the 4th floor. When we step out of the elevator, we see the mother and son already walking halfway down the hall towards the lobby of our building. Note that the stairwell access requires a few different staircases with locked doors where you go from the 2nd floor to the 1st. Did they call 2 elevators somehow? Was the other one faster than the one we were in? I mean, it takes about 5 seconds to get into an elevator, push the button, and get it going. How did they beat us? Case file number 1045, written by Cereal Milk 001, the Tesco Bag Woman. I can't explain what happened today, and I've never come across anything like it in my life. I literally can't stop thinking about it. Today I was leaving work after a meeting and driving home on my all too familiar route. Before anyone asks, yes, I was sober, and no, I wasn't under the influence of any drugs. I also have no mental health issues or under any abnormal stress. Anyway, I was coming to a turnoff on the road, and there was a car in front of me that had stopped to let traffic that had the right of way pass. This is a popular crossing for people trying to skip the road. As I came to a stop, I noticed a woman wanting to cross. She stood out to me instantly as she was carrying a Tesco bag at a weird angle. Instead of holding it by the straps, she had the opening curled up and was holding it out in front of her chest. She appeared in her mid-50s and was wearing a woolly hat, parka jacket, and the hood up. She hurt my head a little, as you could tell she didn't have much money and had a sad expression on her face. I waved my hand to signal to her to go ahead and cross in front of me, and she gave me a gentle nod to thank me. I thought nothing more of it until I traveled around 10 minutes in the direction of which she was coming from. As I pulled to a set of red lights, I put on my handbrake, and someone caught my eye to the left of my vision. It was the same exact woman, same clothing, carrying the same bag, heading in the same direction she was originally heading towards. This happened at 2:30-ish p.m., and it is now 10 p.m. I can't stop thinking about it. It would be almost impossible for her to get there ahead of me via means of transport or walking. I know the buses that pass this route, and none of them pass me by. I thought that maybe she caught a ride from someone, but again, I would have been ahead of them, and to get to where I spotted her the second time, you'd have to go around yourself, adding around 20 minutes extra journey time. I'm a skeptical person, so I told my wife, and she just kind of laughed it off and didn't take me seriously. Anyone have any ideas or similar stories? I'm really trying to make sense of this for my own sanity. Case file number 1046, written by Owl Cries. The road trip with 2 wild mysteries. This is an unexplained phenomena from about 5 years ago. My partner and I took a road trip from Florida to North Carolina and decided to drive straight through. We stopped once or twice for gas, and the car was always monitored by one of us. We had 2 suitcases in the back seat. Mine was on the bottom. When we arrived in North Carolina, we both had the distinct feeling that there was no way 10 hours had passed. We both kept exclaiming that it felt like we went through a time portal, and we were confused at how quick the car ride felt. I remember actually trying to recount the audiobooks we listened to and piece together how it was possible that 10 hours had passed. Well, we arrive at the place we're renting out and put our suitcases in the room. While I'm in the shower, I hear my partner exclaiming and freaking out. I get out of the shower to see what it's about. He's crouching over the suitcase, utterly confused. The zipper is sealed shut with a plastic loop and 2 tiny metal keys, like the keys that come with a diary or perhaps a tiny lock on a brand new suitcase. There was no way to open the suitcase without breaking the plastic loop. He starts freaking out and asking the people in the house we were renting from if they were playing a trick on us. They look at us like we're crazy. Finally, we open the suitcase and all of my stuff is still in it. Okay, first of all, my suitcase was on the bottom of the 2 suitcases. Someone would have to get into our car while we weren't looking, and like I said, we never really left the car, to put this plastic loop with keys on it. And why would they choose the one on the bottom? And who would do this? This was an old suitcase I had used many times, so it's not like something I just never noticed was there. Second, even if it was sealing the zipper closed. And I had even grabbed a sweater out of my suitcase during the trip. This is a completely unexplainable mystery. Case file number 1047, written by BMC25. Cut and paste this couple in pink. This is a recent story. I've managed to hopefully be able to articulate this as it was somewhat logistic based. I live close to an intersection of 2 main roads, Road A heading north and south and Road B heading west and east. I live on Road A. On the corner of this intersection is a collection of 3 small shops that share the same building. I live 2 driveways up from that, roughly 250 meters from the intersection. My sister lives off a service road of Road B, about 10 houses up, roughly 450 meters from the intersection. I know this is specific, but it is very relevant. It's about a 6-minute walk from my house to hers. The walk to the entrance of the service road would be about a 4 to 5 minute walk, not to mention there is a relative incline at the beginning of Road B. I had to run to my sister's house as she tends to borrow things without telling me and forgets to bring them back. I needed to grab my vacuum. I went to get in my car and remembered that it was a bin day. I proceed to grab my bin and begin walking it to the side of the road where at the very end of my driveway, there was a couple walking by, heading up my street, north, away from the intersection. A man in a green tracksuit, which I thought to be quite the look for a man of his age. The woman was in a similar pink tracksuit. They looked to be in their later years, I'd say late 60s. After a polite little back and forth, you go, no, you go, I allowed them to pass first. I rolled my bin to the curb and got in my car and pulled to the end of the driveway to do a loop through 2 back roads to avoid traffic lights and cars, etc. The old left and left again if you're in Australia. I have timed the trip to take approximately 1 minute and 25 seconds to make the car ride. I'd be happy to give it 2 minutes if it's busy, and I can't turn onto Road B immediately from the back road. However, it wasn't busy, as it was 11 a.m. on a Sunday. As I turned left out of my driveway, I saw the couple had proceeded maybe another 50 meters before crossing the street now from the left side, which we were originally on, to the right side of the road, and stopped to look at some furniture that was on the street for hard rubbish collection. I proceed with my 1.5 minute drive to my sister's. When pulling into the service road, who do I see? The couple in their tracksuits are now heading towards my sister's house. Now I know it was them because again, I had to stop and let them pass as the service road is gravel, and to avoid a large pothole, you need to drive slowly on the footpath. So I have a good 5 to 10 seconds of taking this all in before I can drive past them. I stop at my sister's driveway, very confused as I get out to open her gate. They walk past with no interaction at all. Even if it was possible that these people are marathon sprinters who were heading north and a minute later were heading west and uphill without breaking a single sweat in their 60s, covering a distance that even me as a 27-year-old female couldn't cover in that time, well, even then it wouldn't make sense. I had literally just interacted with them within minutes, and they acted like I was a stranger. I do know I am a stranger, but they acted not even slightly confused. It's just like they were literally copy and pasted, and I just can't work it out. I have gotten my sister to walk from the spot I last saw them towards her house from when I turned down the first side street, and she can't make it there before me without breaking into a sprint. So, to Mr. Green and his little wife, if you were Usain Bolt in disguise, you got me. If not, Your programmer's messed up. Case file number 1048, written by Urkalan. The Canyon of Secrets, a hair-raising account of the unknown. This happened in the American Southwest to my parents while on vacation. They stopped at a spot along their travel route to get some food and got to talking to a young local who worked there. He told them about a box canyon that was on the way to their next stop. For those who don't know, a box canyon is characterized by being narrow, having high vertical walls and a flat bottom. To hear my mom tell it, he described the canyon with an almost spiritual reverence, saying that it was incredibly beautiful and had superb acoustics, and that he loved taking his guitar out there to play. My folks like doing stuff off the beaten path, so they decided to pay a visit. The canyon seemed to be quite isolated, with no buildings of any kind around it for miles. By the time they parked their car and made it to the canyon's entrance, the sun was just starting to go down. They said they seemed to be the only ones there, with no parked cars other than their own. They made their way into the canyon. After the fact, my parents have both said that they separately, without speaking of it, started to feel a touch of unease. Not totally unreasonable, as it was starting to get dark and the canyon walls pressed close on either side. Despite feeling this, they continued on until they heard the noise. My parents report the nature of this noise differently. When I ask them to describe it, their faces sort of scrunch up, like it's an effortful task, and they're still uncertain. My dad says it sounded like a person, possibly a man, speaking a low, single word that he didn't understand. My mom says that it didn't really sound like a word of any kind to her, just a strange, deep noise that rang out from somewhere nearby above them. It was accompanied by a brief, intense flash of pale light. Neither of them knew what it was or where precisely it had come from, but they were both immediately filled with dread and an overwhelming desperation to get the hell out of the canyon. They turned around and booked it back to their car. As they exited the dark closed space of the canyon, my mom describes feeling certain there was something chasing them and thinking that once they got to their car, they would find it sabotaged. That, thankfully, was not the case, and they were able to get in and speed away down the empty road. My mom said she didn't feel safe until they'd been driving for a while, still having the panicked but totally unsupported notion that they were being pursued. When they eventually spoke of it to one another, they weren't able to make any real sense of what had happened. Neither one of them really has a theory. This is probably pretty dull as far as spooky experiences go, but neither of my parents have a history of weird encounters or of telling tall tales, and so it strikes me to see them both get re-creeped out by the mere memory of this incident. I've asked my mom clarifying questions since. She said that the flash of light was actually quite close to them, mere feet away, and that it sort of seemed to hang in the air for a few moments. She had a hard time describing it very clearly. Case file number 1049, written by Amalthea the Unicorn. The Eerie Forest Metamorphosis. About 2.5 years ago, my mom got a puppy. When he was old enough and had had his shots, I started Googling local areas where we could take him. I found there was a forest with paths nearby that I hadn't been to before. We decided to give it a try, so we went there and it was nice, but very, very hilly, to the point it was even hard to get around as I'm disabled after having had a stroke. There were also a couple of field-type areas on the perimeter that were closed off with gates and not accessible to the public. I managed to squeeze through a gap in the gate and get into one. It was nice. Not long afterwards, we went back again. It was completely different this time. I know it was the same place as we went in through the same entrance with a big sign with the wood's name outside, but it was totally different inside. Those inaccessible closed-off fields were already gone. It was much less hilly, and there was now a totally different field open to the public with a walking path through it attached to the woods. The paths were different. It was just like a totally different place. I still go there regularly, and it hasn't changed back. It really weirds me out remembering what it was like the first time. It even has a really different atmosphere now. The subsequent times I went there were suddenly loads of houses all around the woods that hadn't been there before, where the fields had been the first time. Bonus file, written by Red Krausen, New Orleans Terror. This story may be hard to believe, especially since I don't have the photo at hand, but I promise I'm telling you the truth. When I was a kid, I went on a church service trip to New Orleans. Our aim was to help clean up remaining damages from when Katrina hit. About midway into the trip, we helped remove brush and debris from some plot of land so a playground could be built. We were all ecstatic because the day was incredibly productive and we really believed that the spiritual forces of good and godliness were at work through us. That night, we visited Bourbon Street to have dinner, listen to some live music, and celebrate the work that had been done. At some point, one of the church leaders was taking pictures and pointed her camera to the sky, facing a distant casino. The sky was clear, no clouds. She snapped a photo, and when the screen displayed her photo, there was a silver-looking face smiling heinously while clasping his hands and protecting the casino. His face seemed metallic with many wrinkles. If you can imagine Heath Ledger Joker, but without eyes, a huge mouth, no teeth, and many wrinkles, like fabric being pulled in multiple directions, that's what it looked like. It had wet-looking orange hair that draped around midway down its face. Its nose was half missing. The entire group went hysterical when they all looked at the photo, and the rest of the night we were disturbed. The joy we had felt all day instantly went away. Few of us slept. I had a variety of hallucinations in the dark, of demons falling into me. I didn't get any sleep. There were a few girls in the room next to me, who I could hear crying in terror about what had taken place. I say all this to illustrate how the incident felt like a direct, successful attempt to hijack our spirits of positive energy. One person in the group tried to come up with multiple natural explanations for the incident, but the leader who took the photo always had new details to explain how there wasn't a natural explanation for what had taken place. This incident alone has been enough to keep my agnostic butt alert and aware of all possibilities. Case file number 1050, written by Infamous Benefit 7825. The unsettling story of how I predicted two tragic events. I was just reminded of this, and actually freaked my wife out last week, and it's the second time this has happened to me. I have at least twice now seen news articles about major disasters the day before it happened. The first one being a flight MH17. I saw an article that the flight had gone down, then mentioned it to a coworker. The next day it actually happened. It honestly didn't freak him out. It reinforced his conspiracy beliefs that the government plans and executes disasters. As far as I'm aware, the second time this has happened was with the second Norfolk Southern train derailment in Ohio. The day before it happened, I told my wife, "Oh my god, another one derailed in Ohio." Then the next day it actually did happen, and now my wife is freaked out. I'm leaning towards glitch. Both sites I saw the articles on were reputable sources. I could believe the government caused these things to happen for one reason or another, but having prepared news posts for the event and preventing any journalist or government employees from blowing the whistle, I don't think that's possible. Case file number 1051, written by Artistic Feeling 826. Ghosts, Glitches, and Fog. The Unforgettable Road Trip. Confusing day trip. I'll start this by saying my mom and I are superstitious, and we believe in the paranormal and weird stuff or things such as glitches. This happened to us yesterday, and we've told a few people, and they all think it's extremely weird and it isn't possible. My mom and I were coming back from New York. We were on the highway, and we're going to take the Mansfield exit to go through town. All of a sudden, after a weird fog that lasted maybe 10 seconds, we're on this long-as-hell road we don't recognize, and the next exit is Sebring. Sebring is 18 minutes away from Mansfield. Sebring is also an exit coming back from the opposite way, which is further into Pennsylvania, and nowhere near the New York border. We came up on the Sebring exit as if we were headed back from the opposite side of the state. We're both trying to put it together, and the last time we remember seeing was 4:20, of course, and we were never conscious of the time until it was 6:20. A few minutes after we got off at Sebring, we got off at the Elkland exit, one of the first exits right outside of New York, before we got back on the highway towards the Mansfield exit when we went through the thick fog. I remember it because I said, "Holy crap," when I saw how thick it was. That's what she said. But our conclusion is that the fog did something to cause a glitch, and now we're just confused and missing an entire hour of our lives. To put it into perspective even further, Coming back from New York, you almost immediately hit the Elkland exit. We got off there to go to a store, and we got back onto the highway so we could get off at the Mansfield exit, which is a little after the Elkland exit. In order to get to the Sebring exit, we would have had to pass 3 town exits. As I said, Sebring is 18 minutes away from Mansfield, and there is no way we could have gotten there in the span of 5 minutes. We came to the exit as if we were going back to Mansfield and Elkland. That's just impossible. We stayed on the highway, didn't make any turns or anything. It's just something really weird. Case file number 1052, written by Ikoza Quark. The Parking Ticket Paradox. Pre-pandemic, I traveled downtown roughly twice per week to attend technical user group events. My employer would reimburse me for parking ramp expenses, so I'd always use the nearest parking ramps available. Years ago, I had the unfortunate experience of losing a parking ticket and having to pay the full daily rate, expensive, to exit the ramp. Needless to say, it's always stuck with me, and since, I've made it a habit to always place my ramp ticket in the same place each time before exiting my vehicle, in the center console cup holders. On this particular occasion, I recalled the lost ticket, thought to myself, yep, don't want to ever go through that again, and placed the ticket into my empty cup holder. Mind you, I keep my vehicles pretty pristine. No garbage, nothing really in my car other than my sunglasses. The event ends and I head back to the car, put it in reverse and drive up to the meter to pay. Look down to grab my ticket, and it's just gone. Not there. Nothing is in my cup holder. I take a few seconds to look around, but there's nothing. By this time, people are piling up behind me. Everyone had to back up so that I could maneuver out. I pulled around and found a spot in the ramp so that I could figure out where my ticket was. Of course, it's going to be on the floor somewhere between the seat and the center console. Nope. Other side? Nope. Under the seats, purse? Nope. I know where I put it, but oddly it's just not there, and I'm starting to second guess myself. Maybe someone got in my car and took it along with other items from the center console? Nope, nothing was missing and my car was locked. So this went on for a good 10 minutes. Finally, I start screaming to the parking ticket gods and forcefully feel around my cup holder and proceed to lift up the bottom rubber mat to see if it somehow fell under or got caught in a crease. I mean, it's empty. No physical way it could have fallen in a crease because there wasn't one. It's a solid molded piece of plastic. I put the rubber mat back down and tap it in place. Defeated and wanting to give the universe a big double finger, I grab my seatbelt and proceed to buckle in for the grand payment. Look one last time at that damn cup holder, and the fucking ticket is sitting there dead center, pristine, like it's never moved, no creases, on top of that rubber mat I just tamped down. This is a 4-inch by 2-inch green ticket. What the fuck? That rocked me. I have no explanation. Case file number 1053, written by Humble Acanthicita 28. Beyond the Veil. The unexplainable mysteries of life, death, corn, and lightning. I have for sure died twice, quite possibly 4 times. Of the 2, I'm very confident in the first one. It happened at about 1998, and the other one in 2018 or so. In the first instance, my best friend and I were driving on gravel back roads in the middle of the night, 40 miles between towns in rural South Dakota. I was admittedly going far too fast, and we came over a small rise. There was a T in the road where you could turn left or right, but straight forward was a driveway to a farmhouse. The driveway went for about a half block or so, and then transitioned into a cornfield. I remember saying, "Oh fuck," and starting to slow down as we started flying through the very tall corn. It was late summer, and the corn stalks were basically full grown. The sound as my car plowed over the corn stalks and into the field sounded like the most vicious hailstorm ever. The experience was completely overwhelming to the senses. The sights and sounds of flying headlong at high speeds into a fully grown, densely planted cornfield cannot be overstated. This is where things get weird. The next thing I remember was sitting at a stop sign where we would turn into the main highway in the area. It was nearly completely silent, with only the light hum of the engine creating any sound. This was at least several miles away from the field we had just flown into. My blinker was on, to the left, and the car was just sitting still with my foot on the brakes. The lack of motion and dead silence was, for reasons unknown, also absolutely overwhelming. I felt extremely disoriented and discombobulated, and was honestly not certain how I had come to this point, and was even concerned that perhaps I had blacked out or something. I was just not certain how we had arrived where we were currently sitting. At this point, I did not remember flying through that intersection or crashing through the cornfield. That memory was gone, either blocked or unremembered. I looked over at my friend and again said, "What the fuck?" He had a dumbfounded look on his face as well and shrugged his shoulders, and after a moment said, "I think we go left?" I actually got out of the car and found the northern star to make sure we would be turning in the correct direction onto the highway. I also surveyed the situation, grasping for some semblance of understanding. We were surprisingly close to the town I lived in at the time. In short order, we made it to my apartment and both crashed as it was 4 in the morning, and we had had a very long day. I was dead sober for this entire experience, but I did not feel right and knew something was amiss. We got up the next day about mid-morning and got back in my car to drive to my friend's town where he was attending college, which was going to be about a 5-hour drive. We needed gas, and I stopped at a station to fill up and get other miscellaneous supplies. The car I was driving at the time was old enough to be using a bit of oil, so I almost always checked the oil. Again, at this moment, my memories of the cornfield and all of that were completely gone. I popped the hood and went around to the front of the car to get at the engine. I lifted the hood and glanced down. I have never been so absolutely baffled and immediately enlightened at the same time. A light breeze would have knocked me over. The engine compartment was almost completely chock full of corn stalks. My knees went weak and I became very, very heady, and I felt my brain perform several full spins. Once again, I very loudly and firmly proclaimed, "What the fluck?" and called my friend so he would come around to the front of the car too. The very instant I saw the corn stalks in the engine compartment, the entire accident flashed back to me. I don't remember the point of death, but I remember all the other details, including being very confused, sitting at the stop sign by the highway, and the brutal contrast between flying through the field and sitting still at the stop sign. My friend said to me, "Do you remember?" I said, "Yeah." We talked it over multiple times during our long drive, and we had the exact same memories. His memory also returned to him the second he saw the corn in the car as well. A couple months later, I tried to drive the same back roads that we had been driving to find that intersection in the farmhouse and the driveway, and the cornfield too, of course. There were a couple of very unique, specific details to the location where the accident happened that should have made it very easy to recognize and find. But I was never able to locate a spot like this on any of the roads anywhere around where we would have been driving. Microsoft had also just released their satellite imagery, and I scoured everywhere between those two cities, and I have never been able to find the location where we had our accident. I honestly don't think it exists on this timeline. The other incident, I was out in the middle of the night again, in a very rural area during a thunderstorm, to take lightning photos. I'm pretty sure that I saw the lightning bolt that killed me prior to my timeline jump. I remember sitting in the car and finishing my styrofoam cup of gas station coffee and hopping out of the car to smoke a cigarette and go pee on the gravel road. Most of the lightning was several miles to the west, and it wasn't even actually raining where I was parked. I was not worried about lightning safety at this point. Now, the very large power lines that take electricity to the town I was living in were right by this road. I've been pretty close to a couple of lightning strikes. I'm no stranger. I remember getting that very powerful, static feeling, and the hair on my head and arms started to stand up. I knew what was coming. I started to say, "Oh fuck." I reached for the door handle, and before I could even get my profanity out, I remember a profoundly huge snap sound and a blinding white light. The next thing I remember was sitting in my parked car with my nearly full cup of coffee in my hand. I remember thinking that I wanted to smoke a cigarette and I needed to go pee, so I chugged the lukewarm coffee and started to get out of the car. The second my feet hit the ground, I felt the most massive wave of déjà vu I have ever experienced. I nervously glanced up beside the road to look at the power lines. but the spot I had stopped previously was about a mile down the road, and the power lines had turned a corner and not followed the road down to this point. I glanced down the road to what I thought was a spot I had previously been in, and just as I looked down the road, lightning struck the power line in multiple massive flashes, and I even saw the lightning bolt jump down to the ground under the power line. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I witnessed the very lightning bolt that killed me. I have a couple of other experiences where I'm pretty sure I died, but the situations were ambiguous enough that I'm not certain. So you are not alone. By the number of people who have had confusing, odd experiences where things are not quite as they seem, there have been many people delighted to finally gain the proper word to label their experience: quantum immortality. Case file number 1054, written by Fullbeat6784. When a Ring Goes Rogue, a story of salt and mystery. Hello. A lot of my glitch stories are from quite a long time ago, and I don't want to risk misremembering or misrepresenting anything. This one happened very recently though. I have this gold ring I got about 8 years ago. It's a thin little scalloped rose gold band that is easy to wear and that I absolutely adore and that I never ever remove. In the 8 years of having it, I've removed it twice, once when I had an MRI in 2021 and the same week again when I had surgery, and every single piece of jewelry had to be removed for the procedures. Afterwards, I stopped wearing all of my other jewelry, like the many layered necklaces I used to keep around. It was just this one ring, and one little blue stud I wear on my right ear. Seriously, the second I was out of surgery, I was asking for my ring back because it comforts me to have it on. Now, as has happened to a few people during the pandemic and lockdown, I gained a bit of weight. Not so much that I had to remove the ring altogether, but enough that I would have to scrub with a decent amount of soap and warm water to pry it off. All that to say is that this ring stays on very snugly. Last month, I went on a trip with my friends to Mexico, and I had quite a few drinks one night, and I came back home to take a nice long soapy shower. A few days later, when I got home, I realized that my ring was missing. I was quite upset about it, since I love it, but I couldn't do much because I assumed it had fallen off when I had been scrubbing the day off of me in the shower I took. So fine, nothing to do, not until the next time I head back to the same exact spot in Mexico and ask the nice Airbnb owner to let me search the shower, right? A couple of days ago, I was making dinner at my parents' house, not even my house, and when I cook, I always use a special fancy salt that I love because I'm pretentious like that, but we had completely run out. I asked my mom where her table salt was, and she, also someone who never uses it, wasn't sure, so she said just to hunt around the cabinets. I found an almost finished container of salt at the back of the pantry, one that has tiny salt holes in it unless you screw the entire top off, and the top had probably only been taken off once, long ago when it was first bought, to remove that layer of foam and paper that protects the opening. I went to go salt something, and guess what I found sitting inside the box? I have never once touched that box of salt, never opened it, always use my salt. There isn't even a hole big enough in it for the ring to get inside. Even if I had been the one to open the salt for the first time, it would have to have been months and months ago because the container is almost finished, and I don't usually cook at my parents' place. Plus, I was still wearing the ring as recently as late February. I have no idea how this happened, and it's just been sitting with me and making me laugh since it happened. Luckily, this wasn't a scary glitch, but it feels odd to think that I may have just lost a moment of time somewhere or somehow. This is why the story sticks out so much to me, because I don't reach for anything else. I really love this particular grinder. I keep this with the pepper grinder right next to the stove at my parents' house and would have no reason to pick a very old-looking bottle of salt that I didn't even know the location of. The only other salt I use is Morton's, if I have to use heaps to salt pasta water, or stocks or broth, and that has a tiny little metal nozzle and no discernible way to even open it except the metal nozzle. Okay, I guess this ring in the salt jar actually perturbed me a little bit more than I originally released. It's inexplicable. Bonus file, written by Cheese and Crackers 84. The day my dead grandma protected me from a violent burglary. When I was 17, 26 now, we were burgled in broad daylight while I was at home. The robbers were armed and violent. However, nothing about that day makes any sense at all. I've been trying to work it out for the past 9 years, and the only conclusion I can draw is my dead grandma was keeping me safe. Some context. Around that time in my life, I was struggling a lot with insomnia, to the point where I needed sleeping pills to ever be able to sleep. I hadn't slept without them in about 2 years. That particular day, I arrived home from school at around 4 p.m., went into my bedroom. My bedroom was on the ground floor at the back of the house. You had to fully walk into the kitchen to even notice my bedroom door. I sat on the bed and suddenly was overcome with this deep tiredness like nothing I'd experienced in a long time. I put my head down and fell into the deepest nap I think I've ever had, with no help from sleeping pills or anything like that. Whilst I was napping, I had a very vivid dream about my grandma, who had died 2 years prior. In the dream, she was in the room with me. Her presence was so strong I could almost reach out to her. Suddenly, my phone went off and woke me up. It was my auntie, who had just come home to find the front door battered open, and the upstairs of the house and the downstairs living room and hallway had been totally turned upside down. She called as she assumed I wasn't home. She hadn't checked my bedroom. I was super disoriented when she called me, and I thought I had been asleep for hours and hours. I felt almost drunk. I was that disoriented. When I finally realized what had happened, it was only 4:20 p.m., which means somehow, in the span of 20 minutes, I managed to come home, fall into the deepest sleep of my life, and somehow not hear a single thing while the house got totally ransacked. They must have left in a hurry because they didn't check the kitchen. If they had, they would have immediately noticed my room. The next door neighbors then came over and told us they'd heard banging and crashing around. Nobody could understand how I'd been there and not woken up. It didn't and still doesn't make sense. I've always been a super light sleeper, and even if somebody tiptoes into a room, I'll immediately sense it and wake up. Unfortunately, this meant that everybody was slightly suspicious of me for a while, as it made no sense at all. But I swear to God, no matter how many times I play it over in my head, the only conclusion I can draw is that my grandma was protecting me. The burglars were later found, and it turned out they were wanted for a series of violent robberies. They had been armed with weapons and everything. When I found that out, my stomach turned. I truly believe that my deceased grandma saved my life that day. Case file number 1055, written by Bread Lucky, the scary glitch tale of the time warp gas station. I experienced this glitch a few months back. This is a relatively short story, but still creeps me out to this day because of how certain I am of it. On to the story. So I was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in a travel job where I would stay in hotels throughout the week and then travel home for the weekend. I got off at 5 per usual, and before I got on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I stopped at a mom and pop style gas station to fuel up for the trip home. Got my gas, went in, paid for it, and headed for the Turnpike. I drove for maybe 2.5 hours before I decided I was going to pull off and get a quick bite and use the bathroom. I punched in my GPS the nearest gas station and headed to it. And I swear to God, I pulled into the exact same mom and pop gas station. I walked in to get a burger and almost fell over. I was so freaked out. Finished up in the station, walked out to the truck, and my GPS reflected I was in the same spot as 2.5 hours ago. Those 2.5 hours of driving completely erased as it was after 7. I should have been halfway home. The only logic I have is that I fell asleep at the station, but surely someone would have woken me up if I was there that long. I remember the drive and the gas in my truck reflected I had been driving. It's my only glitch and it still baffles me. Case file number 1056, written by Senior Weather 3997. Is this a sign from the universe in a crystal miracle? 2 weeks ago, just after lunchtime, I went into my bedroom ensuite to go to the bathroom. When I came out of the bathroom, on the bedroom floor was an object that I did not recognize. In fact, it was so unfamiliar to me that I kind of nudged it with my foot to see if it was hard or soft or what. After tapping it with my foot, I realized that it was a crystal, quartz amethyst, I think. Now, it's only my wife and our 20-something daughter who live in our house, and no one has crystals or is into crystals. So I picked it up and rinsed it off with cool water, but didn't tell anyone about it for a couple of hours. When no one mentioned it, I said something to my wife and she knew nothing of it, as expected. Later on, my daughter walked into our bedroom to ask my wife a question and saw the crystal and assumed that my wife was meditating or something, since she'd never seen the crystal before. I was feeling increasingly creeped out, but the next day I began to consider it might be possible that this crystal had been provided to me. I've been going through a lot and working on my depression. Could this be? Has anyone heard of this kind of thing happening? You know, where an object just appears in your home. I want to feel good about this, but it still makes me feel uneasy if I think about it too long. Bonus file written by Jimmy Peglegs, discovering the eerie secrets of a medieval Tudor hall. Hello, I'm lucky enough to work in a Tudor hall in the UK. The building is late 14th century, although much of it is late 16th century and later. It's timber framed, and the electrics are in dire need of redoing, so it is a creaky and poorly lit old pile. Places like this tend to accumulate spooky stories, and the hall is no exception, with 2 old legends in particular. There have been loads of sightings around the place that have been reported by both staff and visitors. In the 7 years I've been there, I've been collecting these stories, and we've made a ghost tour from them. I'm somewhat of a skeptic, but I've had 3 experiences that I can't really explain. The first came in the summer of 2018. It was still bright out, so the hall wasn't too dark. I was closing the first floor of the house up on my own. I reached the room where a lot of the sightings were centered. Off to the side is a bedroom with a large oak door. I had my back to the main room whilst trying to close the door, as the bolt was jammed. As I was doing this, a massive crash happened right behind me. I spun around in alarm, expecting to see the suit of armor on the floor, but the room was deathly still. I could still feel the vibrations through the doorknob. Needless to say, I was freaked out and left. The second experience was quite fleeting, but I'm sure of what I saw. Again, at the end of the day, about 6 months after the first experience, in the service wing, there's a large Victorian kitchen, and just outside its door is a small staircase leading up to the servants' quarters and a guest wing. I was heading into the kitchen to turn the lights off, but I looked up at the stairs as I passed and I saw someone in a long white dress pass across the top. It took me a moment as we had other staff in, but I realized that the last visitors had just left. Thinking we'd missed someone, I went up the stairs and searched for this visitor. I looked through several rooms, but there was no one there. Needless to say, it's a spooky old place and many of the staff don't like being there on their own. This is the third story. I was closing the house up in December last year. The house had been decorated for Christmas, and I was showing a new starter which doors to lock and where the lights are. I went into one of the rooms on the ground floor and turned the lights out before noticing that one of the decoration lights were still on. I walked up to the table and switched them off. My new colleague was standing in the doorway behind me. This is 5 p.m. in December, so it's dark. About 2 seconds after turning the fairy lights on the decoration off, something sizable drops to the floor in the fireplace. Another second later, something lands behind me as if it was thrown by someone. We were both startled, so my colleague switched the lights on and we looked for whatever had made the noise, but everything was in its place. It was very disconcerting, and no one could explain it. Case file number 1057, written by Ariolet, The Mystery of the Shape-Shifting Vacuum. Today, while visiting my mom, I offered to help her around the house while she worked in the garden. I began vacuuming her kitchen with her new vacuum cleaner that I hadn't used before. I looked at the settings to be sure I had it all right before I turned it on, and I moved to switch to hard floor, which was the third setting, but didn't pay attention to the other 2 settings since this is what I was looking for. When I got to her rugs, I looked at the switch to switch it from hard floor to a more appropriate setting, and this time, the vacuum read something along the lines of carpet or rug for the first setting. Then there was a symbol with a line at the bottom and small lines coming off the top of that line for the second setting, and a hard floor for the third setting. I immediately thought it was weird that the second setting had a drawing or a symbol when the other 2 had words. I switched it to the third setting and vacuumed the rugs. As I was working on this, my mom walked back through the house and I asked what the second setting was for. I assumed it was for a very short carpet, but was just checking, and she confirmed this. After the rugs, I looked down to switch it back to the hard floor setting, and now the second setting had words indicating short carpet instead of a symbol. I just paused and looked at it for a moment, because it was completely different from what I was positive I saw just a few minutes before. I know it's a small glitch, but I'm positive the first time I looked, it was a symbol in drawing, but every time I checked after that, it was in writing. Bonus file, written by Charles H.S. Prockett. When the wild turns against you, a hiker's nightmare. Several years ago, a friend and I went on a multi-day hiking trip during winter. While preparing for the trip, I found a forum dedicated to the trail we'd been hiking and several threads about people going missing on it. Most of the members blamed the hikers themselves, saying they were most likely inexperienced, would-be adventurers who had gone off trail and gotten lost. There was one old man on the forum who claimed he'd completed the trail once a year for the past 50 or so years, and he believed there was something more sinister behind these disappearances. Naturally, the other members laughed at him. We set off before sunrise to get as many miles in as possible on the first day. That entire day, we only met one other person, a friendly, middle-aged man who lived somewhat locally. He seemed impressed that we were taking on the trail in winter, and even invited us to camp near his property, but we declined and pressed on. That night, we were surprised by some pretty dangerous terrain around the edge of a lake and took the decision to sleep in our bivy sacks under an overhanging rock. Not exactly ideal camping conditions, but given the potential hazards, we felt this was the smartest choice. I don't sleep well at the best of times in a bivy sack, and if you've ever been zipped into one, you'll know how claustrophobic it can feel. The rock hanging over my head didn't help either. A few hours after I did eventually manage to fall asleep, I woke suddenly to the sound of my friend shouting and swearing at me. I popped my head out of my bivy sack and saw that he was still zipped inside his. He had somehow gotten off the relatively level ground we had been sleeping on and was slowly sliding down towards the lake. I quickly got up and dragged him, with great effort, back up to ground level. He was absolutely furious with me, claiming that he'd felt me drag him, but soon calmed down and accepted that he'd most likely rolled over repeatedly in his sleep. We didn't go back to sleep, and instead had some coffee and breakfast while waiting for the sun to come up. When we set off, it started to rain heavily and didn't stop for most of the day. I was also having some trouble with an old injury in my leg, which slowed us down considerably. The sun seemed to disappear rather suddenly near the top of a deceptively steep hill, so we set up camp there and then, this time in a tent. After the rough couple of days we had, we were grateful to be inside a tent, and the ground underneath us was actually not too bad. We talked and joked about the trip so far, and for some reason I remember my friend expressing his disappointment that he'd forgotten to pack his iPad, and then we tried to sleep. Soon after, I began to hear what sounded like human footsteps. I thought to myself, surely there isn't someone else out here climbing this hill at night. The sound continued, and the more intently I listened, the more I became certain of what I was hearing. I poked my head out of the tent, and the sound stopped. I got out to pee and looked around, not a soul in sight. Shortly after getting back into my sleeping bag, the footsteps started again, and this time they started circling our tent. By this point I was pretty frightened, and asked my friend, "Are you hearing this?" He responded, "Yes, I fucking am." Knowing that he'd been hearing them the entire time and sounded as freaked out as I did, genuinely terrified me. We got out of the tent again, and asked if anyone was there, but again, there was no one around and the sound had stopped instantly. The footsteps around the tent continued for quite some time, and we didn't sleep. As soon as the sun came up, we packed up our things, got off the trail and hiked to the nearest village, got a cab to the nearest town, and made our way home. We have never been able to find a convincing explanation of what could have been causing the sound of the footsteps that night, and my friend has since become a full-fledged missing person, paranormal, and conspiracy enthusiast. Case file number 1058, written by Independent.63, crashing into the multiverse twice. Long story short, I was in a mild car crash yesterday. I got rear-ended at a stoplight in rainy, slippery conditions. I banged up my leg pretty hard, and the back of my car was smashed in. Did a police report, filed a claim. All good, all done. Today, I walk out to my car, and it's as good as new. 0 dents, not even a scratch. No evidence of the crash. I swear, I'm just a normal person, no hallucinations ever before, and I have no explanation. I stood there staring at it for like half an hour, touching the surface, trying to figure out how. Did I quantum jump? A glitch in the Matrix? Magic? Did I die in the crash and now live in some alternate reality, Final Destination style? How does a metal unbend itself overnight? And here's the real gut punch. It happened again a few days later, but this time it really stuck. The damage and all didn't go away. The first event kind of prepared me mentally for the second one, but none of this makes sense. Case file number 1059, written by As You Hear the Birds. From Depression to Joy, my Ayers Rock encounter. I used to live and work at Ayers Rock. I had been struggling with depression for quite a while, and one day, as I was crossing some sand dunes with groceries, I began to feel like I had enough. I wanted out, and I figured I'd do it when I got home. It was at this point that I noticed something pretty big coming towards me. I looked up to see what it was, but didn't see or hear anything unusual. Nevertheless, I sensed that whatever it was expanded even larger and larger as it grew nearer, and I felt my whole body begin to vibrate. It was like being in a really heavy storm or something, because this thing was immense and powerful. At first I thought I was in the way and was going to be annihilated, but somehow realized that this whatever it was going to pass me. I then had an extremely strong feeling that it had noticed me and briefly glanced in my direction, a feeling of overwhelming love and compassion, with a hint of teasing humor, like I was some silly little kid, washed over me, and a word boomed in my head: breathe. So I did. I breathed in as deep as I could, and felt months and months of sadness and loneliness and self-loathing simply and immediately replaced with a pure feeling of joy. I was weightless. I was happy. Nothing else mattered. And as I stood there, the whatever it was strode past me on its way to something I somehow knew was really, really important, leaving me with tears streaming down my face and all my groceries spilled in the sand. Creepy file number 87, written by Mesakasa 1. The Curious Case of the Blue SUV, a mysterious road trip story. This weekend, I went through the weirdest road trip of my life. So, for a bit of context, I work with my mom, and we fairly often go on long road trips for work. This weekend, we were coming back from a business fair about 14 hours away from where we live. After about 1 hour on the road, I noticed a blue SUV towing 2 bikes in front of me. I remember it stood out for me because the bikes were really nice ones. Eventually, this car overtook a truck and it got away from us. After about 2 more hours, I noticed the car overtaking us, and it just happens to be the same blue SUV with the bikes from before. I even remember my mom asking if we had seen this car before and me answering, yeah, he probably stopped for gas or something and we passed him. The thing is, along the next 4 hours, this happened at least 2 more times, even though we had stopped ourselves. At this point, I was already thinking it was weird, but maybe that this guy must take a lot of P-stops and likes to make back time by speeding? We were about 8 hours in when we got to a point where the road was completely blocked by other cars that had stopped. We assumed that there was some sort of accident in the road ahead, and that had stopped traffic. I didn't have the internet to check, but I could still see a map of the area on my phone, so I started to check for alternate roads while my mom left the car to talk to the other drivers. I found that there was an exit from the main road about 200 meters from where we were, and that I could use it to go through an alternate road that would take me back to the main one about 5 kilometers ahead. Mom got the same information from a truck driver who said it was a very narrow dirt road, too thin for his truck, but we could probably go through it and skip the accident. She also found out it had been a pretty bad one, and that they probably would take a few hours to unblock the road. Knowing this, we decided to drive through the side of the road to the exit and try to find this alternate path. We also switched seats since I'm better with maps, so my mom was driving. It was already pretty dark at this point, but we had no problem finding this road. The thing is, it was a really bad dirt path, so we had to go pretty slow. We even reached a small wooden bridge that I had to leave the car to check if it was still stable, and it was totally deserted. A bit later, we reached a split in the road, and I looked back at the map to see which way to take. I found out we should go left, but after taking a second look at the map, I noticed something that made me even more creeped out than I already was. The river we had just crossed was called Rio de Mortes, which is Portuguese for River of the Deaths, and it encountered the main road at the point we estimated the accident to be. I decided not to say anything, and we continued to follow the path until we got back to the main road, where we switched seats again. At this point, the main road was deserted as well, probably because every single car going in this direction had stopped at the block in the road. After a short while, we start seeing a few ambulances go by in the opposite direction every now and then, which looked normal at first, but it eventually was looking like we had seen too many of them for a single accident. They also looked exactly the same, but that is what you expect from ambulances. The main road was also very dark at this point, and it went on without stopping for much longer than we remembered from our way to the business fair. Eventually, a car starts to approach behind me, and after a little while, it overtakes us, and to make things even weirder, it just happened to be the exact same blue SUV with the bikes. We eventually pass by a big city, and I suggest we should enter it to eat something a little nicer, even though it would make the trip longer, and Mom agrees. All the weird stuff stopped happening after that, but I tried to Google the accident when we stopped to eat, and again in the day later at home, and couldn't find anything about it, which is pretty weird as well. It was a major accident. Case file number 1060, written by Scarcity Upper 2939. When the universe helps you ace an exam. Some time ago, I had to take a pretty important exam in a different school, with teachers I never met before. The curriculum was given, but we all had to pull a paper, and the one we got was our topic for the exam. There I was, second in line, when I heard a voice. Pull the first one. I instantly froze on the spot, trying to put up a nothing is wrong at all poker face. I thought back, what? Pull the first one. But why? Pull it. Okay, I'm doing it. So as soon as I could, I went and grabbed the first paper and stood there in full surprise. This was an advanced level exam, but this question was super easy. Like I felt I'm having a pleasant chat and not an important exam. I had no idea this was even part of this curriculum and did an effortless 100%. So no idea what happened there, and it was a one-time occasion, but damn was I happy to have listened to that voice. Case file number 1061, written by Tanya Hylian. The night I stepped into a different bathroom dimension. Last winter, I, 27 female, went on vacation with my mom to a small town in the middle of a huge ecological park, consisting of kilometers upon kilometers of desert. It wasn't our first time visiting there. We just love how calm and quiet it is, the beautiful scenery, and the kind people who live in that town. Since it's a very small town, there's only one hotel with 5 rooms and 3 bathrooms. 2 of the 3 bathrooms are inside the restaurant that's attached to the hotel, and to get to them from any of the rooms, you have to pass through various sets of doors. Because of this, at night, we only used the other bathroom, which was a metal door on the other side of a small patio. I remember that on the first day at the hotel, I went to the bathroom, and when I tried to close the door, I couldn't close it fully because there was a crack on the wall the door was attached to. There had been an earthquake a few years prior, which was probably the culprit for this crack since the last time we'd stayed at that hotel, many years ago, it wasn't there. As a result, we had to tie a string from the lock to a nail in a wall inside the bathroom to close it, and even then it never fully closed. It annoyed me, but we weren't paying much, and we were the only ones staying at the hotel anyways. Now here's how the glitch happened. It was our 3rd day staying at the hotel, and we had just come back from a walk up a nearby mountain. Very small, the walk barely lasted an hour. It was still fairly early at night, around 10 p.m., and my mom said she was going to get ready for bed. I told her to go ahead because I wanted to stargaze for a little while, taking advantage of the cloudless sky. I did so for about half an hour or so, before deciding it was time to get ready for bed as well. I went to our room, got my toothbrush and toothpaste, and then went to the bathroom. As soon as I stepped inside, everything felt off. I reached for the light switch, but it wasn't there. I searched for it to no avail, and then, when my eyes got used to the darkness, I saw it was on the opposite wall, the one that had a crack. Except when I turned on the light, I realized there was no crack. As such, I was able to close the door perfectly, and there was no string or nail to tie it in place. It was as if it was an entirely different bathroom, but everything else was the same. The tiles on the walls, the slightly rusted mirror, the cheap-looking head shower, the white sink with the pink soap. Everything was the same as I remembered except for the cracked wall and the light switch. It was as if, for the time I took to wash my teeth, I was in an alternate timeline in which the earthquake didn't happen, the wall didn't crack, and the light switch wasn't moved to another wall. It was a very surreal experience, and the more I stayed there, the more nervous I became, so I hurried up, turned off the light, and pretty much sprinted towards my room. My mom was already asleep, so I decided not to bother her, but it took a while before I could sleep because I was feeling very unnerved. The next day, with the sun now illuminating everything, I went back to check on the bathroom that had scared me so much the previous night, but it was exactly as it should be, crack and all. Creepy file number 88, written by Jesse B21, A Dog's Intuition, How My Pomeranian Detected a Threat. This was in 2011, a year after I'd, female 22 at the time, graduated college. I was living in my first apartment with a friend. I had adopted the sweetest dog I'd ever had, a runt of the litter Pomeranian who literally loved every person she ever met. My nephew was young at the time and would sometimes handle her a little roughly. Sweet kid, and we'd correct him, but he didn't quite realize how little she was under all that fur, and she tolerated it without ever nipping or anything. One day, my roommate was gone and there was a knock at the door. It was a handyman who said he was there for an annual check on appliances. He was wearing the apartment complex's standard uniform and had a badge, so I didn't even really think twice about it. And upon follow-up, he really did work there, even though I hadn't been notified this would be happening. He comes in and begins chatting and sort of leering. Felt uncomfortable, but not nearly as freaked out as when my dog came rushing in between us, ears back, teeth bared, and started growling at him. He kind of awkwardly laughed and went to pet her, a weird choice for a dog that is baring its teeth at you, and she immediately lunged forward like she was going to bite him. He leapt back before she could. Tiny dog, large man, but he was obviously freaked out. At this point, she is straight up barking at him. He asked if I could put her away while he worked, and I lied and said she had separation anxiety, so I recommended he'd come back another time when I could walk her, or when my roommate was there so one of us could be in a room with her. He never did come back. My dog lived another 7 years, and not once did she ever growl at another human, let alone try to bite one. You hear about dogs being able to read people, so I don't know if he would have done anything to me while on company hours. I still think she could sense he wasn't a good person. She was my good girl. Case file number 1062, written by Anonymous. I witnessed a cart teleport at 50 miles an hour. This happened last year, and is quite easily the most insane thing that I have ever experienced in my life, besides a certain trip when I was 20. I am now 25. I work at an international racetrack just north of Pittsburgh. We have a nationally renowned karting track, and a huge racing organization was there for the weekend doing a national title race, USPKS. I was actually off that weekend, and the karting director called me at like 6:30 that morning on Saturday and asked me if I could pick up a shift because someone called off. So I did, and I came in to work the track as a flagger. I never worked for the karting, really. I'm the race control for the road course, so I know how to use the flags and rules, etc. I'm on a sheltered wooden platform near the back of the track in turn 12. Got my radio on me and my flags, race is going on, and I'm just hanging out watching carts fly by me at like 50 miles per hour, making sure no one gets flucked up or goes off the track. I see a cart coming out of turn 11. It's a slight right-hand bend, and then goes 500 feet into turn 12, which is a mean right-hand turn. My platform is directly in between these two turns, and off the track another 50 feet, so if I'm staring straight, I can easily see the section of track from 11 to 12. As soon as a car comes out of 11, maybe another 50 feet, it literally skipped to turn 12. It teleported. There was no linear movement or increase in speed. I did not blink or close my eyes. It was at 11, and then suddenly 12. Even if I did blink, there is absolutely no way the car itself was moving fast enough to cover that amount of distance in the time my eyes would have been closed. What's even more flucked up, and also backs up if I did happen to blink, is that the sound of the car teleported as well. I started to faintly hear it come up to 11, and then it was a distinct engine braking of a two-stroke when it came to 12 to brake hard and take the turn in a matter of a mere millionth of a fraction of a second. I couldn't believe what happened, and my heart felt like it literally stopped, and it almost triggered a full-blown panic attack. I have moderate anxiety. I couldn't stop thinking about what the fuck just happened. I didn't tell anyone, no one would have believed me, and I still have never told anyone this before because it just seems so outlandish and unbelievable. I know what I've seen, and the card absolutely went through some sort of time and space warp, or I don't even fucking know. I really don't, and I'm very glad other people have seen weird crap like this too. FYI, no drugs, alcohol, sleep deprivation, heat exhaustion, nothing. I was 100% conscious and clear-minded when this happened. I have seen hundreds of thousands of laps completed, and this has never ever happened once. Case file number 1063, written by Fanfiction Music Lover. The mystery of the chocolate plaque that fell from the sky. I'm in Turin, Torino, Italy, with an Erasmus exchange program, and yesterday, as I was on the escalator exiting the metro station in the Dante stop, and there was a man before me, his bag and jacket closed. He was about 2 steps away from me. As we approached the end of the escalator, suddenly a chocolate plaque fell out of nowhere, missing my head for a few inches. I was shocked. I instantly thought that the man before me had somehow lost it, and I grabbed it and ran to him to give it back. Thank God the guy spoke English, and he said that he hadn't lost the chocolate plaque and joked that it was a present for me by God or the universe. We both looked up and around us to make sure that someone wasn't looking for the chocolate, and then we parted ways laughing at this odd incident. I returned to my hotel room exhausted because of a long day and baffled by the chocolate, and I shared the incident with my roommate. She couldn't believe it either. We opened the chocolate, and as we ate it, I realized it had berries in it, which I'm allergic to. I rushed to get my anti-allergy pills and then timed my reaction just in case I needed medical attention. My roommate is studying the package, and she realizes that the chocolate has expired in October of 2022. Shocked once more, I'm left wondering how that chocolate plaque fell from the sky. No one was out on the balconies around the area, and no one was looking for it. I'm just at a loss for a logical explanation. Bonus file, written by Rafi Raya, my terrifying encounter with a shadow dog. This morning, I woke up at my usual time, 5 a.m., to go to the gym before classes. I'm off campus, staying with my parents. However, they are away for a month, so I've had the house to myself. Well, anyways, every morning I wake up, let my dog out to go do his business, shower and brush my teeth, let him back inside before I get dressed and leave. This morning, I woke up feeling a little weird. The house had a strange energy, and my gut sensed that something was up. I let my dog out into our pitch-black backyard. The deck light didn't turn on like it usually does, which is unusual, but I thought nothing of it and went to get a shower. After my shower, I went back to the sliding glass door to put my dog in, and I could see him sitting there waiting for me. I opened the door and watched him, a large black lab, walk in and under a table. I then proceeded to close the door and walk to my room to get dressed. Here's where it gets weird. As I was leaving the area where the back door is, I felt that same strange feeling that I had been feeling all morning. I decided to look at the dog's bed and noticed he wasn't in it. So I looked back at the door and saw, to my utter confusion, that he was still sitting outside. My stomach instantly dropped. I could have sworn on my life that I watched him come in the house and under a table. I walked back to the door, let my actual dog inside, and instantly searched for my house to see if another animal came inside instead. I didn't find anything. As I thought more about it, the thing I let in before looked more like a shadow rather than a dog, and it moved differently, although it was around the same size. I called my girlfriend to tell her about it, as she was waiting for me at the gym, and she said it was probably just my imagination. But I have never ever imagined something this real. I wasn't even tired. I noticed that my dog was acting a little strange too, staring at one of our walls and growling quietly. I left soon after that and got on with my day. I am at a loss. If anyone has a possible explanation to ease my nerves, because I'm really dreading sleeping there alone tonight, I'd love to hear it. Case file number 1064, written by Inner Ad 5786. The unexplained portal in my backyard. When I was a kid in the 1970s, I lived out in the boonies between Cleveland and Akron, Ohio. We had a large house sitting on several acres of land, most of it being heavily wooded. There was a large hill in the front yard, sloping downward away from the front of the house. One late November, we had enough snow so that my brother and I could go sledding. I hopped onto my trusty flexible flyer runner sled and bolted down the hill. My brother was still at the top of the hill as I descended. After I came to a complete stop, I began to dig around for a mitten that fell off. I didn't dig far until I saw a light peeking out from the ground, shining upward at me. I cleared away some more snow and I couldn't believe what I saw. I could see daylight? Not only that, but I could see about 50 feet down and make out a couple houses and a street, all through an 8-inch hole that I dug in my front yard. There was apparently a whole neighborhood that I could see through this hole, all below me through this tiny passage. This wasn't an area of the country with any mountains, cliffs, or overhangs. No, this was a world that was somehow visible in a place that should have been invisible, which was within 50 feet of dirt and rock, covered in snow. My brother then descends down the hill on his sled as I'm sitting there stunned. I turned away for an instant to look at him, then looked back. The world I'd discovered was now gone. I could now only see dormant grass underneath the snow that I had previously cleared away. The next day I sledded down the hill again and looked in the same place for the mystery neighborhood, but I never saw it again. The only person I ever told is my wife, and it was many years later. She of course looked at me like I was nuts, and who could blame her? Case file number 1065, written by Molly R. High. The Mystery of the Old Pink Lady. Was in Savannah, Georgia, visiting my brother who is stationed there. I was with my friend and my mom, and we were going to this allegedly haunted restaurant called The Old Pink House. Well, my mom tends to mix up words a lot, and told me the restaurant was called The Old Pink Lady. So when we were driving there, I put The Old Pink Lady in the GPS and we followed it. We were almost at our destination, and all three of us thought it was a pretty weird location. It had brought us to this pretty ghetto neighborhood with no businesses or restaurants in sight. Then Siri tells us that we have arrived at our destination, which was just this house in the middle of this neighborhood. No street sign or anything with the word pink in it at all. Suddenly my friend goes, "Holy fluck, look!" and pointed to our destination. I crap you not. Sitting on the porch of this house was an old woman in bright pink robe. It was incredibly weird, and we were so confused because nothing in our vicinity had the word pink or lady. So my mom calls my sister-in-law, who tells us the restaurant was called The Old Pink House and not The Old Pink Lady, and my mom laughs at her mistake, and we reroute to go to the restaurant. It was probably the weirdest coincidence ever, and made me and my friend feel like we were being watched or something. Super odd. My mom continued to joke that maybe she's known as the Old Pink Lady. Bonus file, written by Sasha 1695. Sinister Gray Fox, my experience in the deep woods. Came here hoping anyone could share similar experiences or give insight. I took a trip to stay in a cabin in the middle of the woods high up in the mountains of the city of Ranger, Georgia, USA. This neighborhood was 30 minutes up in the mountains away from civilization, and even the cabins were spread far apart. The front deck of the cabin was completely exposed to the woods, so I acknowledged that any animals could stroll along if they pleased. But I stayed there for about a week, and me and my boyfriend sat outside on the front deck every night, very late, and at no point felt in danger. It was peaceful with fireflies out and sounds of crickets every night. Until the fifth night. It was eerily dark too. The moon was covered heavily. It was about midnight, and all of a sudden I didn't feel peace like I did those other nights. The forest went completely quiet, and I felt a horrible sense of dread. I genuinely feared for my life. I sat there in my chair, looking out into the dark forest, trying to rationalize and calm myself down that it was my mind playing tricks. But all of a sudden my boyfriend said out loud that he felt unsafe too. I told him I felt the same, and we ran inside. The cabin has 3 floors, and we were able to climb out the window and sit on the roof because we still wanted to be outside and relax. Didn't matter how high up I was, I felt something truly evil and stayed inside. The only other time I felt something so evil or like someone was watching was when I had a few paranormal experiences at a haunted house. Georgia doesn't really get mountain lions, maybe a bear, but it didn't feel that way at all. Holy crap, I just remembered something about that night. I remember hearing a blood-curdling scream, and we pulled out a flashlight. Turns out it was a gray fox, and they make scary screaming sounds. The weird part was that the fox was running and had its ears and tail down. This was in June, and I just read that foxes scream like that when it's mating season, or if they're in danger. Their mating season is winter and spring, so it was definitely afraid of something. Case file number 1066, written by Anonymous. The Twilight Zone on the L train. 3 stops at First Avenue. I live in New York City. The L train runs from Brooklyn to Manhattan under the East River. In Manhattan, the stops are First Avenue, 3rd, then Union Square, which is a major transfer point. During morning rush hour in 2012, I was in a packed L train which emerged from the East River at First Avenue, opened its doors as per usual, closed them, then proceeded along the track as per usual. About 30 seconds later, the train stopped and the announcer said, "First Avenue, 3rd Avenue next, stand clear." I looked around a bit stunned, but the bleary-eyed passengers were mostly staring into their phones. I imagined I must have gotten confused. The doors closed again. The train took off down the track, slowed down, stopped, and opened its doors. The announcer said, "First Avenue, 3rd next, stand clear." This time, I poked my head out quickly and saw it definitely was First Avenue. I spoke up, shyly, to no one in particular. "Hey, did anyone notice we stopped at First Avenue 3 times? But just one of 2 people kind of looked up quizzically and then evaded eye contact. The doors then closed. The train took off, slowed down after 30 seconds or so, and opened. 3rd Avenue, Union Square next, stand clear. The train then continued west down the track, normal as could be. For years I've thought about this event. I was there, cognizant and clear-eyed as ever, clutching a coffee, but I've never found any explanation. Case file number 1067, written by Laptop Armageddon. My art creations vanish from the internet. I had drawn 2 pictures like a month or so ago and recently needed some information I had typed down when I showed them to some friends online. The thing was, I couldn't find the images anywhere. I checked my chat histories on things like Discord and my texts. Hell, I even tried to find the Reddit, Twitter, and Tumblr posts I had made, but there was nothing. I had printed them out at some point and they were pinned to a cork board. Guess what? Fucking gone. My family didn't remember putting the images up for me. Even the art program I used to draw them, Ibis Paint X, didn't have the images. I have no reason to delete them from anywhere, and yet not a single site or application I had posted these pictures in had them. I could understand one thing, but everywhere? Literally everywhere? People I asked said they remembered vaguely seeing the images, but couldn't find them as well. Seriously, not a single person could find proof these images existed. The only way I know they exist is because I have them in my gallery. I still don't know why or where these posts and messages went, or why specifically these 2 images decide to be fucking purged from literally everywhere, but I felt like I'm going crazy. Case file number 1068, written by Jophistopheles, How My Dream Helped Me Cheat Death. When I was 16, I had a dream. I was riding my bike down an unfamiliar road with library books. I had just checked them out from the library behind me, near the baseball stadium. There's a 4-way stop ahead of me, and my view of the road to the right is blocked by trees. As I approached the intersection, I don't really make much of an attempt to slow down. Everyone's got to slow down. The only traffic on the road is going the same direction I am, and even if there was cross traffic, they'd have to stop too. By the time I noticed the olive green SUV, it's too late. The driver ran the light, easily going double the limit. They slammed into me, pinballing me into a nearby pole, then into a fire hydrant. My bike is crumbled on top of me. There's no question that I didn't survive. And yet, the most absurd thing is that just before the accident, my vision stopped. Just before I crossed the road, as my body was flung away, I simply stood there like a neutral observer. It was like watching the instant replay death cam and just waiting to respawn. It was an odd dream, to be sure, but one I wrote off as having an overactive imagination. After all, that scenario just wouldn't play out. I lived in the opposite direction, and it was far enough away that I'd simply drive instead. Good attempt, brain, but you won't fool me. I'm 19, attending community college locally. My family had errands to do in that part of town, and it wasn't really anything I could help with after half an hour. However, I'd recently taken to checking out CDs from the library to burn to my collection later, and since my bike was still in the van, I might as well bike the mile or two down to the library. I hadn't found anything worth listening to that I didn't already have, but I did find a few books to my liking. I rode my bike back, the library behind me, the stadium further back. The only traffic was going the same direction, and there's no one else on the road. Not that I could really tell. There were trees blocking my view, and I couldn't really hear anything over the cars passing me. I came to the intersection, and a wave of terror just hit me with full force. I slammed on the brakes at that stop sign. For a split second, I wondered what the hell I was doing. And then, an olive green SUV, easily going 50 in a 25 zone, roared past the trees. Thanks to my sudden stop, they barely avoided clipping my front tire. I damn near fell off my bike shaking. I dragged it to the sidewalk, sitting on the grass, watching the cars go by, and just waiting for the adrenaline to calm down enough that I could get back. 2 cars come to the stop sign. The first one passes the intersection. I saw my body, crumpled by the fire hydrant. The second car passes in front of me, and it's gone. Case file number 1069, written by Disturbed Serenity, Perfume and Time Warp, My Journey into the Past. This was the weirdest experience I've had to date, and I still get choked up and emotional when I think about it. It was 2010, and I was 25 years old, living at home with my very supportive parents who were helping me through college, after previously dropping out of high school and having 2 amazing children. It was an early autumn afternoon, around 4 to 5 p.m. I was in my room, doing some homework on my laptop at my desk. The desk faced the wall directly across from my bed, and my older style box TV was on top of my dresser to the left of my desk, about 2 feet away. I was, as usual, procrastinating doing my homework, so I was mindlessly watching some dumb TV show. Because my TV was so close, I stood up instead of using the remote to change the volume on my TV. As I reached out my left hand to press the button, as if a switch flipped, my entire environment changed. This affects me to this day. I still feel it in my soul that something strange happened. I didn't hallucinate, it was real. I was back in my childhood home, some 20 miles away, and seemingly 18 years in the past. I was standing in front of the only hallway closet in the 1-bedroom house that I grew up in. The house was over 100 years old, and the closet was one of those with the doors that slides open on tracks. You know, the ones that doors never go back on the tracks right, so you must be careful with how you open it. Anyway, the door to the closet was open, and my already outstretched left arm was reaching toward a very distinct item. When I was little, my mother had this perfume bottle that, for some reason, I was absolutely in love with. The perfume itself was cheap and didn't smell particularly good to me. The bottle was glass and shaped like a bird, maybe a dove. Its wings were up and outstretched. It was beautiful, but it had a broken wing. I probably broke it, being the curious and clumsy child I was, and still am. So there I was, one moment in my somewhat modern bedroom in 2010, the next, in the old 1-bedroom hallway, back in time 18 years. While I was there, I saw the bird bottle. I was within inches of grabbing it. My heart melted for that dumb little bottle of stinky perfume shaped like a one-winged dove. Oh my god, this is not a Fleetwood Mac song, I swear. Before my hand could actually make physical contact with that precious bird, the switch flipped again. I was back in front of my TV, outstretched left hand and all. My mind could not comprehend what just happened, and I felt immediately sick and dizzy. I was in such a state of shock and confusion that I just walked out of my room, down the hall, into the living room, and out into the front yard. I could do nothing but lurch over, hands on my knees, and try desperately to catch my breath, but mostly my sanity. This experience was so jarring, so real. I was physically in front of that open closet, reaching for that damn bird bottle. Then I wasn't. I wasn't particularly stressed about classes. It was community college. I'm not prone to hallucinations and was stone cold sober when this experience happened. I've only told a few people because, honestly, the subject of momentarily teleporting through time and space doesn't come up in conversation often, and I only know a few people that I can tell. Has anyone had anything like this happen? I still have no explanation, and it might have just been a weird break in my psyche, but it was not a dream, and I was not under the influence of anything or under any unusual stress. Case file number 1070, written by Menace to Sobriety 13, Razorheads Gone Rogue. My 22 pack of Razorheads disappeared from my toiletries drawer about a month ago. The pack is quite large and contains 22 Razorheads, each packed in a small plastic box with 3 Razorheads in each box, along with 1 razor. I know for sure that no one else touched it, since I'm the only one in the household using razors, and the drawer is in my room under my bed. Additionally, I have other paraphernalia in one part of the drawer, which is quite visible. If either of my parents opened it, they would have noticed it for sure. Now to the event itself. A month ago, I was getting ready for a date with my now ex and wanted to shave while I showered. I knew I had the aforementioned pack of Razorheads, and I had only used 2 plastic boxes by then, so I had 8 or 9 left for sure. When I opened the drawer, I couldn't see the carton sheet, which was the packet and the biggest and most noticeable item in there. I started rummaging through the drawer, but I couldn't locate it. After several minutes of searching, I was quite frustrated because I couldn't find them, so I started taking things out of the drawer one after the other until all the items were out and the drawer was empty. I only found 1 plastic box with 3 Razorheads while removing the items. I thought maybe I took all of them out and threw out the carton, but where are the rest of the Razorheads? Since all of this took me around 10 minutes, I didn't have any time to think about it and search for them, so I returned all the other things and went to shower. After a couple of days, I wanted to shave my legs quickly in the shower. I went to the drawer thinking I put the rest of the Razorheads in one of my necessities, but it turns out I hadn't. I even removed the drawer to check if they were somehow in the very small space behind the drawer, but of course they weren't, so I just let it go. This morning, I opened the drawer, and there was a Razorhead package with 7 or 8 plastic containers inside. I was like, what the hell? How and why? Just to add that I wasn't high on anything while I was searching for the package, nor this morning when it reappeared, and I haven't seen it before this morning, and I open this drawer daily. Case file number 1071, written by Mask of Zero, Mystery of the Airport Cafe. Uniforms appear out of thin air. I was sitting in an airport cafe in Poland, writing a research paper during a long layover. At a table in front of me, a man and a woman sat down speaking German. They were dressed in ordinary clothes. I didn't take note of what, but it was nothing remarkable. I made eye contact with the woman. I could hear bits of their conversation the entire time, ignoring most of it while I typed. I became rather engrossed in my research, but was aware of people existing and leaving the cafe. The same 2 people were still sitting there, discussing the same topics, when I looked up 30 minutes later. But now, they were dressed in uniforms from a major airline, including ties, which I always notice. They never got up or left their tables. They obviously didn't change in front of me. I would have noticed the motions. But suddenly, the 2 people weren't wearing normal clothes, but rather in an airline uniform. I was a bit stumped. I'm convinced this is a glitch. Well, at least in the other former version, the same 2 colleagues also worked together or knew each other. Case file number 1072, written by Tsunami Nat Pot. The case of the disappearing makeup brush heads. This one isn't as interesting as some of the others here, but it happened to me thrice in that apartment. The way the bathroom was set up meant it had two rooms, one for the bathroom and shower, and the other for the sinks and cabinets. The trash can was between the toilet and the shower, so it couldn't have made it into there. We checked the hallways each time too. It only happened at my old apartment. We called the bathroom the black hole. I was doing my hair for a party and dropped one of my small scrunchies and couldn't find it. I called my roommate in, and she and I both took everything out of the bathroom, the rolling shelves, etc. Everything off the shelves, everything out of the drawers and cabinets, and we still couldn't find it. It was a bright yellow scrunchie, so it shouldn't have been that hard to find. The second time, my roommate and I were doing our makeup together, and the head of one of my makeup brushes fell off. My roommate and I both watched it bounce off the sink counter, bounce onto the floor, and go under the little lip where the cabinet door hangs out a little bit. I immediately bent down to grab it, but I couldn't find it. Cue the deconstruction of the bathroom once again, while me and all three of my other roommates took turns looking for it. Even after we all moved out and scrubbed the place top to bottom, we never found it. Even though the door to the bathroom was closed, we opened it and looked in the hallway too. The third time, my roommate was watching me do my makeup again when I lost another brush head. It was literally the same type of brush, just new. Changed brushes since then. Their glue obviously wasn't the best. One of the boyfriends of a roommate helped us this time too, because he didn't believe us about the last time, and the five of us had no luck either. That apartment complex always had weird juju, but that was the third apartment in that complex I had been in, and nothing like this had ever happened. When we moved out, I had one of my exes and a friend come and help look through my stuff and the bathroom because I was still so confused and still no luck. Creepy file number 89, written by Affectionate Row 2397. Eerie apartments, wax in the night. I, 21 male, and my girlfriend, 20 female, rented an apartment for a month. The area was secluded, and after dark, everybody would mind their own business. Neighbors would hardly talk to each other, or even be outside in the evening. Our apartment was in a building with 4 floors, and each floor had a single apartment. All the apartments were very compact and built to be rented out to students. The night we moved in, our taps ran out of water, so I went upstairs hoping to borrow some from the people living upstairs. I realized that 2 out of the 4 apartments were vacant and locked. The apartment on the 4th floor was lit from the inside, so I decided to ring the bell, but to my disappointment, nobody answered. Over the next week, we used to hear the sound of someone whacking a rod or some sort of metal on maybe the floor or some other object. This would start late at night after 1:30 a.m. and continue for hours. Initially, we didn't care about it, but after some time it got us intrigued. The sound was clearly from one of the apartments above us, but as I already mentioned, 2 of the 3 were vacant for sure, and the third one seemed to be vacant, but it was lit from inside. I knocked on its door many times, but no one answered. The whacking sound was a daily occurrence, and on some very late nights we could hear someone climbing the building stairs. It seemed as if we were the only ones living in this building, especially during the day, and until the very late of night. We made up theories to convince ourselves that it was nothing, but the pattern of the whacking was too irregular for it to be made by wind or something other than a person. It would start almost daily at around the same time. We asked people around, but didn't get any satisfactory answer, and no one knew if anyone lived there. Towards the end of our stay, I saw a shady-looking man going upstairs during the day. I asked him if he was the owner of the apartments upstairs. He said he was, also including the one on the 4th floor. I asked him if anyone lived upstairs and also about the whacking sound. He told me no one did and that he's looking for tenants. He said that he had no idea about the sound. To my surprise, he then asked me, "So, for how long are you going to stay here?" "4 more days. We'll leave on the 30th of this month," I replied. He asked me if anyone else had rented the place for the next month, and I told him that I didn't know. So, the strangest part is that for the next 4 days, there was neither the whacking sound nor the sound of someone climbing up the stairs late at night. However, my girlfriend's internship got extended by 2 days and we decided to stay there. And just as I had anticipated, The whacking sound resumed after the 30th, the day we were supposed to leave. I don't know what it was. I won't ever know. But I'm just happy that we got out of that place without any consequences. It really scares me sometimes and feels weird thinking about it even now. Case file number 1073, written by Anonymous. The day I stopped a faucet with my mind. Once upon a time, I worked at a pizza shop and had to wash dishes at the end of the day. I was in the back, sweeping the floor, while a faucet poured water into a big, commercial 3-hole sink. This faucet was super duper loud. Someone came back to talk to me, and I couldn't hear them over the roaring faucet. Without thinking about it consciously, from way across the room, I extended my hand and kind of made a squeezing motion, and the fucking faucet turned off. The guy trying to talk to me went pale and left the room, and it was never spoken of again. I still don't know what he wanted, and I've never been able to reproduce this moment of telekinesis or whatever it was. Case file number 1074, written by Alasarila. Did my dream predict the future or unveil another dimension? When I was in university, I rented a larger apartment with 3 friends. One night, I saw this super vivid dream, which I remembered after waking up completely and in high detail. It was our friends, who had married recently and were on a honeymoon at the time. I explained the dream, including all the small details, to my roommate. My dream was an exchange in our living room, where the newlywed wife of my friend was reading today's newspaper, while we guys, 5 of us, discussed other stuff. She suddenly raised her head from the paper and asked if we had today's paper. I responded by laughing and asking if she was having so much fun at her honeymoon that she lost track of time. 2 weeks later, the couple had returned and were visiting us. At some point in the evening, we sat down on the sofa, exactly to the same seats where I saw us in the dream. I didn't remember my dream at that moment. A few minutes later, she started reading the paper while we talked. Then the situation started to escalate. The memory came back big time. She raised her head from the paper, asking for today's paper, and I lost control of my own actions. In complete shock, I realized I could not do anything else than laugh and say those exact words my dream had me saying. At this point, my friend who I explained the dream to earlier had gone completely white on his face. I was sweating and gasping for air after exiting robot mode, and everyone around the table was looking at us. The rest of the night, we discussed if time was a roamable dimension after all, and if there are wormholes through the multiverse to other points of time. Case file number 1075, written by Sassafras. My mom tried on a dress, but she didn't? My mom and I were shopping at a small boutique. I mean, it was barely bigger than 15 by 20, with an open door at one end and changing rooms on the other end at the back. It was midweek and just before lunch, so we were the only shoppers in the store. So we're shopping, and I watched my mom go into the changing room with an armful of clothes, including a pretty green dress that would have been perfect to wear at Christmas. Totally not my mom's style at all, but it would look pretty on her, so I was interested in seeing how it looked on her. Now, my mom dresses like a lot of women in their late 60s, early 70s. You know, shoulder-length bob hairstyle, khakis, a sweater and a puffy vest. But I can recognize her anywhere, from her mannerisms, her walk, etc. I kept browsing for a few seconds, less than half a minute, and turned around to go down the next aisle and find my mom standing there, looking at 2 sweaters. I said, "How did you try all those clothes on so fast? Did that green dress look good on you?" And she said, "What? I didn't try anything on." I booked it over to the changing room I saw her go into, pulled back the curtain, and saw that the dress was hanging there. There was no one else in the store, let alone someone that looked just like my mom. I called her over and pointed at the dress and said, "I just saw you go into the dressing room holding that dress to try on." And she said it wasn't her, she'd never wear that. I have no idea what the hell that was. Also, I tried to get her to buy the dress. I felt like it was a sign that she should buy it. Case file number 1076, written by The 70s Disco King, Arcade, Dreams, and Deja Vu. Had a dream where I went to this arcade I'd normally frequently go to. I was with my buddy, and before walking outside to wait for a ride, we both bought sodas to go. We're squatting outside on the curb, holding our drinks, looking into the parking lot. I finish my drink and for no reason, I start putting my hand in my soda cup and continually throw ice out of the cup onto the ground. I pause for a second and say softly to myself, déjà vu. As even in my dream I was thinking I'd seen this somewhere before. I then lift my head up, look left, and see 2 kids with skateboards riding, and then I wake up. About 10 days later, I'm at the arcade again with the same buddy. Before walking out to wait for a ride, we both buy sodas. We go outside and sit on the curb in the same spot in my dream. I finish mine and again, I start repeatedly throwing ice out of the cup. I pause and say softly to myself, déjà vu. I freeze in pure terror, realizing I was repeating the same actions in my dream and recognizing that the déjà vu I had in my dream was only déjà vu because it's now happening 10 days later. I slowly crank my head to the left because I heard some noise, and to my further shock, I see 2 kids walking towards me with skateboards in their hands. I sprung to my feet and started flipping out with my buddy still sitting, confused and asking me what was wrong. For what it's worth, purchasing a soda while leaving and throwing ice out of my cup aren't normal rituals. In fact, it was the first time I could remember ever doing either of those 2 things.
Case notes for the bonus file. Chronicles of a Demonologist and a Chaplain. Honestly, this was just a cool set of stories, experiences, and just your life path and the training process to become a chaplain demonologist. So fascinating. I didn't know I would actually be so engrossed in a story like this, but it's really cool. It's one of the perks of reading stories constantly is I have to go and read so many of them. I am constantly surprised at what I find interesting. And I'm very impressed at how rigorously you apply the scientific method within this envelope of religious investigation. You wouldn't necessarily expect that from the outside point of view. The idea that religion is all just about faith, not investigation. Definitely bucks the trend in that. My thoughts about demons. Perhaps the most important question is, are most spirits just spirits and they're not demons? Demons are a separate category? Is it like in Supernatural where a demon is a soul that was twisted by being in hell and tortured for eons, and after a certain point they just break and become evil? Something like that, maybe? Or is it just a malicious spirit that died, a person that was evil, and then when they die their spirit lingers behind and that's a demon? Is it interchangeable? And how are possessions possible? Because as you mentioned, they're extremely rare. There's very few stories I've read revolving around possession. I'm glad that they're rare, but it begs the question of why. Is it that difficult to possess someone? Because, if a demon can do it, I'm assuming they would want to all the time. So there's a fundamental limitation on their ability to do it. Curious. But it's interesting how you describe spirits and supernatural events in the same way that I was thinking about it too. Like, they're mostly just harmless parlor tricks, almost never harming someone or killing them. It's just meant to instill fear or even just make their presence known. But that's it. They don't seem to be able to do more, or they're not willing to. They're just a puzzle to be solved. Exactly as you say. I love that. And I'm not specifically a religious person. I think I've mentioned that a few times on the channel. I consider myself agnostic. I don't know what the ultimate truth is. I don't know if we live in a simulation. I don't know if there's a God out there. I don't know if there is a God. Is it a Christian God, or Catholic, or Jewish, or Muslim, or any other sect of faith? I don't know. All I can say is I try to examine the world and base my life around that, and just look inside myself as well and think, okay, what is good and what isn't? Because I think we all have an innate sense of that. I think if you try to just be as good as possible in what we all have baked into us, if that's some cosmic rule, or if God wove us in a certain sense with this understanding of right and wrong, it's pretty clear cut, if you ask me. Don't harm others and be honest. And don't drop Dave. Definitely sinful to do that. But yeah, very cool stories. Very glad you shared this with us. And now time for the quote of the day. Brevity is the soul of wit. Shakespeare. This is something I need to apply to myself a bit more. I can go on tangents all the time. But yeah, this is similar to the expression of, if you can't explain something simply, you probably don't really understand it. the more you understand a complex topic, the more you're able to distill it down into a small nugget of wisdom. Case notes for file 1037. The Chicken Pad Thai Enigma. Manifestations are interesting to me, mainly because I don't think it's a direct creation of matter. In this case, I don't think your mind literally created the chicken pad thai. It was still just created from ingredients and cooked by the chefs in the restaurant. What's more interesting is how you were guided into that exact area where you needed to be for your will to not be manifested exactly, but fulfilled, I guess is the word. It's like turning on in a video game the directional cheats, the one that will just guide you towards your next objective. While we don't physically see a light that points us in the correct direction, we still have a general sense of where to go. It's intuitive and automatic, but we have to be true to ourselves. It's kind of like in Pirates of the Caribbean. Jack's compass will direct him towards what he wants most, but he has to be honest about what he really does want most, and if he doesn't know what he wants most, he may be surprised when he gets to the destination. This isn't what I thought I wanted most, but it actually is. I guess the universe truly knows our actual desire. Case notes for file 1038. The Infinite Cookie Glitch. All the cookies, now you're speaking my glitch language. Fantastic. Hard to imagine a better one, besides maybe gold or silver or cash just duplicating in your hands, or, you have cash in the Tupperware and that duplicates. But indeed, the real question is the food mass that you just ate from the cookies vanishing from your own stomach in order to balance out the mass equation, energy-mass balance in the universe? Supposedly you can't create anything from nothing. If something does appear, it requires extra energy or mass, where mass is just a confined state of energy. The only exception to this rule is if you draw mass or energy from a different parallel universe, which is, I think, often what is happening in these duplication events, or things just appear out of nowhere. So, in another universe, instead of having extra cookies, you have less. Not a good place to be. And now time for the quote of the day. Although our intellect often longs for clarity and certainty, our nature often finds uncertainty fascinating. Karl von Clausewitz. Yeah, this swings right back towards what I keep saying, in that life is only interesting because of the mystery. We are compelled to solve the mystery, but to solve it, especially if there are no other mysteries to explore, that's a mistake. You need to leave at least one mystery alive. And if you have no mysteries in your life, it's just living on white bread and water all your life. No good. I do find the juxtaposition rather interesting, in that we're so compelled to solve mysteries, and yet to do so actually makes us less happy. The journey is important, not the destination. I suppose if you have multiple destinations, that's fine. But the final destination, it's never going to be as satisfying as the journey itself, in my view. If you have nothing to strive for, I guess the game is over. Case notes for file 1039. Atlantis is a mythical place. So the only explanation I could think of the mundane variety would be some sort of elderly or disabled shuttle and elevator service. But you mentioned in the comments that there are elevators, but they're very slow. So it doesn't seem like this would be possible, and obviously just going up the stairs wouldn't be enough. You need to walk the rest of the way as well. Power walking, as you say. So could an old lady with a stroller beat you in that distance? Unless there really is a shortcut that cuts through the whole thing that you don't know about. Thing is, there aren't a lot of options here. It can't be astral projection, because if you project your soul, you're not going to also project your kid as well, and the stroller. That physical matter, I don't think you can project things like that. Like the other story where the grandma was driving in a car when she's supposed to be in Mexico. No, that doesn't fit. Now is it multiversal peering? That's a bit more possible, but it's still very odd. Why would she be in the same place, dressed the same way with the stroller, but beat out the other copy of herself in a different universe? It's conceivable, small differences, butterfly effect and all that, but outside of multiversal peering, I don't see it. I don't think it's a doppelganger either because of the child. The child is what really shifts things. Multiversal peering is harder to place as well because your coworker also saw her both times. So he would also be peering at the same time in the same universe. It's altogether rather weird. So in a nutshell, I think Atlantis stumped me. I kinda want to go gambling now though. Case notes for file 1040. When time is not linear. So our perception of time is linear, but it's the same way as watching a movie. The standard pathway to watch it is from start to end, but you can rewind it, you can jump to different segments. And the most interesting thing to me is the concept that reality is buffered, but also buffered within different segments. So it's not like a movie exactly. It's like there's a whole movie playing out, but in localized segments, time can be manipulated. It's like in an MMORPG in a server-based grid, and there's different grids. So if you're in a specific grid, there's a certain server responsible for that grid, and you can make alterations in that zone that won't affect other zones outside of it. And it's kind of like this in physics. We all have our own reference frame, and it's tied to the speed of causality, which people know as the speed of light. Can the grid be shrunk down smaller? So localized events in a reference frame can happen in a much smaller environment. If so, that would explain a whole lot of time anomalies, because it literally can just be manipulated from the server center. A developer could just say, well, in this grid, where you and your friend were with the pellets and the dog, they just rewind time. It could be as simple as a couple clicks of a button, because reality was already written. Even if it isn't buffered at that point, you already experienced what happened, so it could just be rewound. The thing is, it would mean that in that area, that localized grid, time would be different than the outside world. The thing is, it's just a few seconds, so you wouldn't even, unless you were trying to measure it with an atomic clock inside and an atomic clock outside of that reference frame, you would never know. You lost a few seconds, you can never quantify that. There's no way to do it. So that actually makes a whole bunch of sense. It fits perfectly well. How cool. The only real question then is, why did it happen? Was it an error, or did someone actually choose to do that for some reason? Is there a reason why the pellets couldn't fall on the floor for some reason that would somehow injure you, maybe? Someone would slip on it and bang their head and die? And then how does it fit into quantum immortality? Because, what does it matter if you die in one copy of a quadrillion Googleplex copies of in the multiverse? It doesn't seem to make any difference. But maybe there's a lot more going on and it's all interconnected. I can just try to piece individual components together, and the picture isn't entirely clear when you try to combine it all, but I understand a lot more than I did when I started, that's for sure. We all do now. Case notes for file 1041. The Multiversal Genes. So I only own 2 pairs of jeans. Well, 3 now. I just bought another pair because the other ones were ripping apart. And I can say, being a minimalist and not owning a lot of clothes, if I just saw another pair that was in my closet, I would be completely stumped. And yeah, you say, it's a small thing, but it's impossible. It's like the frozen peas in a different story. Someone broke in just to put frozen peas in your fridge or freezer, or someone broke in here to leave a pair of pants that fit me. So a simple transfer from a different universe, and one of those copies that you had pairs of pants that fit you because they were yours, you actually wore them over there. And over there, they're just missing. It's kind of simple. And now time for the quote of the day. There is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. Ernest Hemingway. It's like the first time you go to the gym, people will often be afraid because they're going to compare themselves to other people that have been there for years. And, maybe they're overweight, maybe they're not very strong. Some people go to the gym and they can't even bench press the bar, just the empty bar. Is that wrong? Are you bad because you're not as strong as other people? No. We all have a base template that we start off from genetics, our life circumstances, as they say, life isn't fair. So if you're going to compare yourself to others, you have to compare their entire life path. Did you start at the exact same point in time? Did you have better parents? Did you have more money growing up? Did you have better genetics? You never got sick? You just had better teachers? There's an infinite pool of variables to choose from that could determine or influence where someone ends up in life. That doesn't mean don't strive to improve, of course not. Life isn't fair, but even if you're dealt a bad hand, make the best of it. And that's where it comes into place. Instead of comparing yourself to people around you, you'll never be the best. You could be Larry Wheels, who, if you don't know, he's a bodybuilder, powerlifter, he's extremely strong, probably one of the strongest in the world, and yet he'll go into competitions for arm wrestling and be humbled by people that are just so much better in that field. So even if you're the best, the number one in the entire world in some area, you're not better than everyone else. You're just better in that one specific area. The real goal is to better yourself. And yeah, you can still consider where you stand, like in a general sense. If you can run a marathon, you can appreciate the fact that, yeah, most people can't run marathons, so that's good, that's impressive, but it's the difference between comparing yourself to individual other people versus like the macro statistical scale to have an idea of where you're at. That's fine. I think that's healthy, but just try not to focus too much on people that are at a more advanced stage than you. Ultimately, always strive to make progress, but try to compare yourself to who you were yesterday. If you're better than who you were yesterday, you're doing well. And just keep on doing that, and yeah, eventually you'll be truly amazing. You know, when I look back at where I was at when I started the channel over 3 years ago, you know, I've come a long way. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off. Case notes are file 1042. Masters of Spacetime, my daughter and I. So the compass spinning is fascinating. It means there was electromagnetic interference. Not surprising, but if spacetime portals are involved in these teleportation events, and so frequently experienced while driving, it means one additional piece to the puzzle was added, EM interference. It might mean there's technology involved. Maybe aliens are causing these, or maybe it's even an artifact of their own technology. If aliens are here, I would imagine they would have advanced cloaking technology. So we wouldn't even be able to see them most of the time unless they wanted us to, or unless it was malfunctioning on their end. But I don't think that's very likely. No, I think this could be artifacts of distorting spacetime, and if they're able to interfere with gravity itself without thrust, displacing an object behind them, they're just able to levitate via magnetism. But a more advanced version that's able to actually manipulate spacetime itself, I could imagine this causing issues with the fabric of spacetime itself. It's funny, in Star Trek, eventually they reach a point where they realize their warp drives are actually damaging the fabric of spacetime. Maybe something like that is going on here. Maybe it's not the universe being unstable. Maybe it's aliens. Case notes for the creepy file number 86, room 1709. So I know in the moment this would have been horrifyingly unsettling. But something about the line of him asking casually what room it was comes off as a bit funny in the moment when I was reading it. Is this room 1709? Was he actually drunk? Or was he trying to steal something and didn't expect people to be in the room at that hour? Or maybe he expected you to be sleeping. One thing I recommend that people get when staying in hotels or any unfamiliar place is a door stopper. There's ones that attach into the door bolt area, where, you know, the door closes and the bolt from the door handle goes into the actual bracket of the wall. You can attach in something that connects within it. It's like a metal bracket. It's very light, portable, and it just prevents the door from being opened. I mean, you could brute force it fairly easily, but it would make a large noise and you couldn't just pick the lock and come in stealthily. Or if you have the key. I wonder if this person had help from the front desk. Maybe that would explain why there were 3 different stories, just trying to make you go away, but you kept asking questions. My gut says there's more going on here than just a drunkard. Of course, it happened so long ago you'll never know, but I'm glad you were safe. That's the main point. And now time for the quote of the day. We must all suffer from one of 2 pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The difference is that discipline weighs in ounces, while regret weighs in tons. Jim Rohn. Yeah, regret is heavy. You ever think back on your past and think, you know, that was an opportunity I missed. I should have done that. I should have gone on the outing with my friends. I should have climbed that mountain. I should have been more bold. Or maybe you regret a choice that you made that was too risky. It's not as clear-cut as sometimes people want it to be, because sometimes taking too many risks is the problem and the thing you regret. And of course, sometimes not taking enough risks is what you regret. There's no redos in life unless you have like some weird space-time rewind anomaly. Generally speaking, the moves you make, those are the moves and you have to live with. If you're not happy with them, there's not much that can be changed about it. It may just be that this is one template of the world, one universe in a great multiversal simulation, and when we eventually do die for real, we just awaken in the real world and get to pick a new adventure. It's an interesting concept. And I don't think it takes away from the meaning of life if it's true. I don't think it means that it's not worth living life and trying your best and making the best of it. Not at all. I think it's important to know what you want from life and to go for it. And while regret is inevitable, don't let it weigh you down in the tons that it is. Push it off, brush it off. It's not worth letting it destroy your life. Case notes are file 1043, the Black Triangle Encounter. So if I had to venture a guess, I'd say you were abducted earlier in time than when you had the dream. The dream was your mind slowly piecing together what was suppressed. I think aliens have memory suppression technology, but it's clear it doesn't work perfectly, and there's methods and techniques you can use like hypnotherapy to recover them. In some cases, just dreaming, the reorientation of the synapses and memories in your brain can recover the severed connections. The mind is a giant maze of networks, synapses trying to connect to each other, and those connections represent our memories. If they're blocked or maybe just chemically suppressed, then you can't access the memories. But if you rewire a different path around the maze to get to the same destination, it's like those maze games, puzzles that you have to solve, like you start here, you end there, how do you get there? Well, if you just rewrite a different path, that's kind of easy. And that can happen via dreaming. So I think you were recovering those suppressed memories. I don't necessarily think they were happening while you were dreaming at that time period. Curious though, do aliens really just want to study us? At this point, I would imagine that they have enough data on us. So what are they really after? Is it something more than just curiosity? I don't think they're malicious necessarily or outright evil. I don't think they want to exterminate us or enslave us. They could have done that so easily. They may just be observing and trying to gather as much data as possible. Case notes for file 1044, Schrödinger's elevator. So I believe when we're isolated from the rest of the universe, in a room or a metal box in this case, and actually maybe the fact that it is a metal box amplifies the isolation. It's harder for any outside matter or energy to get into that box if it's metal versus just like a cardboard box or something. We are in a sense disconnected from reality. So maybe not a full disconnect, but a soft patting away, and we know that any interaction with matter can collapse its waveform and alter it in other ways, which is why we can't know everything about particles, and because of the uncertainty principle, you can't observe something without changing it. Most likely, I think time simply warped in that metal box, the confinement. So for you, it felt like 5 seconds, but in reality, it might have been 30. Case notes for file 1045, the Tesco bag woman. So sometimes most known glitch types don't really fit well. Doppelganger, astral projection. I can't see them applying because of the bag itself. They wouldn't carry over. If you astrally project, you're going to take the clothes that you're wearing at the moment, but nothing else. Like the car, you wouldn't take it for driving, you wouldn't take the bag with you, probably not the bag. So those remnants that come along and tag along, to me shave away the possibility of it being just a doppelganger or astral projection. Multiversal peering is often the answer that I go to, but it's still odd. Why was the woman so displaced? If it's a similar universe, presumably nearby, should be relatively similar in location. The fact she was 10 minutes away, still heading in the same direction. I guess maybe something weird happened in that universe where she was delayed for 10 minutes. And now time for the quote of the day. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Unknown, but not Buddha, although it's attributed to him. This is a very important quote. I see so many people so angry all the time. And sometimes there's rational reason to be angry, but it doesn't help you. Unless you can act on that anger in a way to actually produce justice but even then, most of the time you just end up hurting yourself and others innocent people. It's like in Arcane, where they want to fight off the oppression, and, generally speaking, they have just cause for that, but you end up harming so many other people. I think anger is so powerful because we can use it to justify unimaginable horrors. So try to dissipate it if at all possible. And if something or someone is making you angry, try to distance yourself from the situation itself. You don't have to be around people you don't like. That's a very important lesson. Even if it's family, I think if they're treating you poorly, give them chances to change. Tell them honestly, without anger. Just be honest and upfront of what's going on. And, I don't think this is acceptable. Please change. Can you understand my perspective? If people won't change to abide by how you want to be treated, then just leave. It's not wrong to do that. In fact, it's exceedingly correct. Case notes for file 1046. The road trip with 2 wild mysteries. Well, this is a full glitch, and not one I have an easy answer for. Could it be aliens abducted you, then locked your suitcase? Obviously, that makes no sense, but nothing really does. It's just baffling indeed. The time anomaly alone is freaky enough, but how can you explain the suitcase lock too? You opened it while on the trip, so it couldn't have been someone pranking you before you left, or during it because you say you were always with the car. No one could have broken into your trunk and then locked it for some reason without stealing anything. What would possibly be the point of that? And the anomaly you both felt, having traveled the distance in shorter time than you expected, is it related to the suitcase? Was there some presence involved? Maybe not aliens, but I don't know what it would be, honestly. Weird glitch, but very interesting. Case notes for file 1047. Cut and paste this couple in pink. Sometimes I wonder about these duplicate human sighting events. Sure, it could be versions of a parallel world, but maybe it's even simpler than that. As you say, cut, copy, and paste. From the server managers, you could say. An extra copy of NPCs that were needed in that exact moment for some reason. Maybe even unrelated to you. Maybe just an extra layer to the whole universe. What we perceive as glitches happening doesn't necessarily have anything to do with us. We just are the ones that are seeing it happen. And now time for the quote of the day. Once you start questioning your beliefs, that's when it's all over. It truly is doubt that kills our conviction. Hiram Yeakley. Conviction is an important word to have in your lexicon. And this doesn't mean that you can't entertain other ideas. I think that's critical. If you want to bolster your own ideas and reach what is actually the objective truth of any given situation, you have to give yourself both conviction and understanding of opposite views. It's the toughest thing to balance because you don't want self-doubt, but you also don't want to be arrogant. So how to balance those things together is one of the great questions of life. Case notes are file 1048, The Canyon of Secrets, a hair-raising account of the unknown. The whole time reading this story, I was thinking of that movie, I think it's 128 Hours, where this spelunker canyon explorer just hiking along, I think he's on the surface, but then he falls into a ravine and he's trapped there. He has to survive for 100 some hours, like not a week, but moving on a week, 4 days or something. Of course, he only has a tiny amount of water, no food, or like a couple bars or something. And it's just interesting what happens when you're all alone and isolated from the rest of the world. There's things out there that aren't meant to be known, or at least to know them is going to be difficult and challenging and dangerous. The light you saw, coupled with the noise, was it just a person that had a deep, gruff voice, maybe someone that was native to the area and they had a flashlight? And I could see the presence that your wife felt being related to that. You were pursued and hunted, but it was just a human being native to that environment protecting their environment. But if it was supernatural in nature, probably a skinwalker is more likely. Case notes for file 1049. The Eerie Forest Metamorphosis. This is a hard one to place. Could it be time peering? You were seeing into a past before things were developed? But it's hard to square that one too, because there were still those guardrails, those barriers that you said preventing you from going past where people aren't supposed to go. If you were peering in the past, they wouldn't be there, because you're talking about even the hills, the format of the land itself changing. You'd have to go back hundreds of thousands of years probably for that to alter the landscape itself, especially in the elevation of it. So if it wasn't time slipped, could it be multiversal peering? But that is also tricky because, again, the alteration of the land itself, it should require so much time. It's such a massive difference. Maybe there was development going on in a parallel universe. And actually, no, scrap that. It would be the first time you went was when you were multiversal peering into an area where there was no development at all. You were just seeing basically the raw landscape with the hills and everything. And then you stopped multiversal peering the next time you went back, and you just saw the developed land with houses nearby and the hills flattened out and all that. That makes sense to me. Case notes for the bonus file. New Orleans Terror. This is very kind of you trying to directly help natural disaster victims. Seeing a lot of that now with the Ohio train derailment and all the chemicals leaking out or being burned into the atmosphere. Whoa, Dave is freaking out from that. He doesn't want to breathe it in. But yeah, it's very kind of you. The best of humanity, curiously and oddly, comes out when disaster strikes. You see that with the Katrina, hurricane floodings, all kind of tornado victims, whatever it is. We tend to bolster together, galvanize whenever it's almost like red blood cells coagulating around a wound when there's a strike. Ordinarily they don't really talk to each other that much, but when needed, when there's a great need, they come together. We're kind of similar to red blood cells. Neat. As far as the story, I think positivity grates on evil forces. It's like Dementors in Harry Potter. They want to suck all the positivity out, but it's even worse than that for them, because they feed on positive vibes. I think most evil is actually repulsed by it. It's almost like magnetism. They can't get near it. It's a repulsion effect. Their will requires negativity. Anything positive, like helping those affected by a disaster, is akin to hearing someone scratch their nails on a chalkboard. It's just, they can't tolerate it at all. It gets at you all the way deep inside your soul, or if they don't have a soul, their essence, I guess. As far as New Orleans go, I've heard from people who live there that it's a city of polar extremes. There's a great sense of good and will and strength, but also a lot of evil and intense negativity. Great divergence. It's a place I would like to visit. I've never been there, but I don't think I'd want to live there. And now time for the quote of the day. There is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. J.R.R. Tolkien. How relevant, right? The good in this world is us. We are the light that shines, or the mass that obscures the light. And we get to make that choice. That's the great thing about life. We decide if we're good or bad. No one else can make that choice for you, and they can try to influence it, but ultimately it's our choice to make. What are you going to choose? Case notes for file 1050. The unsettling story of how I predicted 2 tragic events. So, government-planned events is quite a deep rabbit hole to go down. There's so many theories, the Twin Towers and the moon landing. We live in a firmament, the whole world's shape is a lie. There's so many categories to go down. I don't know which ones are true or not. I'm happy to entertain them, though. It's very interesting and fun to think about. Won't go down that road in this video, though. What I think would be wise from now on whenever you're reading articles related to disasters is looking at the timestamp. Usually they list them when they're published, and even screenshot or archive it, so you'll know if there's any time manipulation going on. Now the people in your life realize that you saw it beforehand, so I guess it wouldn't be time related, but it's still good to have an archive of these articles, because it sounds like it happens frequently enough to you that it's worth paying attention to, let's say. I'm curious really how this is happening, because if the articles really are published beforehand, you're talking to your wife and your coworker about it, it can't be time manipulation, because if it was, they wouldn't remember. So everyone is remembering. It's kind of like in the news broadcast where they were talking about the towers falling before they even fell. It's very curious. Is it just evidence that they do indeed know these events are happening? But why have journalists publish it earlier? I mean, doesn't that just give away the game? It's very odd. Unless there is alternate universe crossovers going on where you're seeing a different universe where it already happened earlier in that universe and then you're just blinking over here. I don't know. I guess that could be a possibility. Outside of that, I'm not sure. It's certainly a useful power to have, if only you could control it. You'd be Nicolas Cage in Next, who somehow still didn't see the nuclear bomb exploding. Case file number 1051. Ghost Glitches and Fog. The Unforgettable Road Trip. So your point about the fog causing this glitch, I think it's related. There's a lot of stories that involve fog. Obviously, there's also fictional stories like The Mist, which is one of my favorite movies. I haven't read the book. I hear it's pretty good. I don't know if The Mist itself is causal, or if it's a manifestation of these weird anomalies coming in. Or are these entities using the fog as cover? It makes sense if there's strange beasts or entities that can manifest fog that they would do so, because it gives them... It's almost like a smoke grenade, like Batman will launch his smoke to dip out if he needs to, or to even go into an area. You obscure the line of vision of people so they don't know what's going on. It makes perfect sense in that regard. If you're going to pull off any sort of shenanigans, you're going to want to have cover from other people's line of sight. So that all fits to me. But in terms of the anomaly itself, it's probably just a space-time warping, which does happen often and doesn't necessarily involve fog. So I don't know if in this case it's related. I think in general, often it is, but in this case, it's just weird coincidence. Well, I really would like to see that kind of thick fog. There's some here in North Carolina. When I'm out walking at night, it's kind of cool. It sets in just as I'm going out for a walk at like 8 or 9 p.m. Very atmospheric. Case notes for file 1052, the parking ticket paradox. So this could be DOP. I think it may be a prankster spirit though. Could be attached to you. There's quite a few of them around, I expect. I mean, they're just bored if you ask me. The more unsettling idea is that it's a server manager that is just pranking you. So it's not a spirit, it's an actual manager, a real human being in the real world. Well, if we're human beings in the real world, maybe in the real world we're like tentacle aliens with 8 limbs, and we look more like squids or something with 8 spider eyes. I don't know about that. I hope not. I hope we're humanoids. Or, I was thinking too, if God does exist, how, in whatever manifestation, whatever religion, if God exists in one sense or another, server manager God, I'm sure he would like to prank his creation sometimes. I mean, wouldn't you if you were God? Not maliciously, but just for fun. In like situations like this, make them think that they're going crazy because the ticket that they know they have isn't there, and then it just reappears. I would certainly do that. And a bit more. What would be the most devious prank? Probably switching out yogurt for mayonnaise would be one of those. I may or may not have done that at some point. And now time for the quote of the day. We accept the love we think we deserve. Stephen Chbosky. Isn't that true? Especially the friends you keep around, they're a reflection of how you think about yourself and how much you value yourself. It's one of those lines from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, where Han speaks to this point. The friends you keep speak to a reflection of yourself and how you value yourself. If the friends around you are all negative and they never seek to improve themselves, and if they're just not a positive force to be around, they're like an anchor that you place on your own ankle and then you go jump in the ocean with them. It's not going to end well for anyone, and you can't really save people unless they want to be saved. Remember that. I hope people will learn to accept that they deserve quite a bit of love if they're good people, and most people are. Deep down. Just have to choose to be. Case notes are file 1053. So I think you were affected by quantum immortality, but there's more to it. Given those cornstalks were within the engine compartment of the car itself, it means that the car actually did crash through the stalks, even if you're in a different universe. So the memory of it was suppressed, it happened within the confines of that original universe, and then you manifested into a different universe via quantum immortality. But you also crashed through the cornstalk field in that universe and just didn't remember it. The host bodies in that universe didn't remember it. But of course, the physical evidence was in the car engine compartment. So you can't ignore that. Makes me wonder what happened after. Because you say that was a T intersection, you went through the cornfield, and then you were at the highway entry point? So I guess maybe after the cornfield, the car crashed through it. But then if you died, the car would have been damaged. So I don't know, maybe the first one actually wasn't quantum immortality, because the cornstalk shouldn't be there if it was. Something else may have happened in that universe. Maybe it was a time reset. And it couldn't be a time reset either, because the cornstalks are still there. The corn is the key, and it doesn't lie. It changes the whole game. Now the second story though, where the lightning strikes you, that I do believe entirely to be quantum immortality. I think you actually did die, and then you were in a different universe where before it actually happened, you were just in a different spot in that universe, and you were able to see it from afar. That's trippy. There's quite a few videos now going around where lightning is striking the same spot multiple times, which it does actually happen. I don't know where this idea that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, that's nonsense. Actually, it's more likely to strike the same place. Dave, come on. Don't be afraid of lightning. So yeah, the second one I fully agree is quantum immortality. The first one, I don't really know what it is. And if you don't know, if you do sense the feeling of static in the air, the charge, like you're going to be struck by lightning, then the best bet is to get down on the ground, spread yourself out in a straight line, and hug your feet together. Not always, but it could sever the connection, the link, because lightning is actually a link between the clouds and the ground. Often it actually starts from the ground, which is why you feel the static charge build up from the ground first. So if you can ground yourself, it may be less likely to use you as a conduit, basically. Because the human body is actually very resistant to electricity. Human skin, anyways, unless there's water. And now, time for the quote of the day. If you don't build your own dream, someone else will hire you to build theirs. Tony Gaskin Jr. Wow, when I first heard this quote, I was just thinking, that's my own story. Before I was working for someone else. And I mean, most people do. I think as a stepping stone, it makes sense. And, maybe some people really do just want the quiet, comfortable, predictable life that working for someone entails. Just get a normal job, work for 40 years, retire. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's still a good idea to have side projects, even if that's what you're doing, and know what your dream is. Maybe your dream is just the quiet life and, have a family, white picket fence, all that good stuff. But I think some people, they don't manifest their dreams because they're too afraid to take the plunge and try. Don't necessarily copy what I did. I was crazy. If you have dreams, know your dreams first and pursue them. It's worth doing. You won't regret it in the end, even if it fails. You only regret not trying. Case notes for file 1054. When a ring goes rogue. A story of salt and mystery. Curious that it would be salt. It's like the universe is trying to tell you that it was a glitch baked from within, as spirits wouldn't be able to interact with salt. Why place it in there otherwise? It kind of proves that it wasn't a spirit that did this. It was the universe. It can't be random either. It's just too damn specific. It has to be whoever is in charge of the universe. God, the simulation masters, whoever it is, they're doing this for some reason. They took the ring, or the ring was accidentally misplaced by the universe, and they figured, well, we have to return it. We'll just do it in a way where they think that maybe it was an accident on their part. Although, even there, it's a bit loose. Why not just put it back in your own home, where you would expect that, oh, okay, maybe I just didn't take it with me to Mexico, or something like that. So I'm not sure on the reason. I just know my gut tells me this cannot be random, and it can't be spirits, because of the salt. Case notes for the bonus file. The day my dead grandma protected me from a violent burglary. Can loved ones' spiritual fragments linger behind? For various reasons, absolutely. We know that. I don't think they're able to physically fight the intruders off. I think more likely what happened is that those violent intruders didn't start just ransacking the place themselves. Why would they do that? I mean, yeah, maybe they'll move things out of the way, try to determine if there's any hiding spots, like there's a secret cache of gold and silver under the floor or something. But they would try to be somewhat quiet. I mean, unless they're absolutely stupid. Which maybe they were, but I'm going to assume that they're just normal intellect, and from that, my gut tells me here that your grandma was the one that actually moved things around, and made a whole ruckus about it, so it would both alert the neighbors, the noise, and also spook the burglars terrifyingly. They're just breaking into a place looking to rob it, and then everything starts flying all over the place and things are breaking from your grandma's actions. It would freak them out, and yeah, the robbers were later caught, you mentioned that, but I don't think that means that they would spill the beans on that, try to claim the insanity plea by saying that the house they robbed was damaged by a ghost. They would just keep their mouth shut on that. And they may not even believe it happened themselves, even though they saw it. That's what I think happened. So yes, your grandma did protect you. And that's beautiful. Now time for the quote of the day. The greatest mistake you can ever make is being too afraid to make one. Being paralyzed by fear of failure. That's what this comes back to. And a lot of people are affected by that, sadly. It's hard to blame them. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. It's Murphy's Law, right? But even though things will probably go wrong at some point in some way, the whole point of trying and success is not to avoid failure, it's to persevere in spite of failure. Until eventually you succeed, or maybe you don't. But you still challenge yourself and you're better off for it. It's like in a MMORPG where you're going out and adventuring. It's not just for the destination or the loot, but also for the experience. You're literally leveling up yourself by just trying. So don't be afraid of failure. And also know that failure is inevitable. It's that one TNG episode where Picard is telling Data where he can't beat this intelligent but ordinary mortal, and because of that he thinks that there's a problem in his code, but in reality it's just that sometimes it's possible to make no mistakes and still fail. Isn't that a concept? There's just no winning move. That is sometimes the case, like the war games, curious game you have here, the only winning move is not to play. Of course, in this case, do play, because not winning isn't necessarily the point. I think that's the best summary. Case notes are file 1055. The scary glitch tale of the time warp gas station. So falling asleep at the gas station and then dreaming you drove for 2.5 hours, this is a possibility. We do know that people can have very lucid dreams and sometimes it can be hard to distinguish what is real and what is a dream. I mean, that's a common trope in many science fiction, or even philosophy. It's kind of a horror setting for me. Back to TNG, where Riker is imprisoned in this alien camp, and he doesn't understand if it's because he keeps zipping between the camp or the prison colony and then back on the ship, and every time everything seems like it makes sense, but he doesn't know what's real and what's fake. So messing with your mind, even if it's your own mind doing it, is unsettling, for sure. Or you have the inner light. Man, TNG is just making all the references this week. It's kind of ironic, though, that I'm creeped out by the idea that reality isn't real, but I love the idea of simulation theory. So, I don't know what's going on in my mind there to square that circle, but something is happening. I don't know, maybe it's because it's just so high level that everything is a simulation, and then we wake up and it's the real world. But we chose, maybe it's because we chose to be in the simulation. I think that's what's going on. It's like load your own adventure, choose your own adventure. For the story though, in this particular case, if it was a glitch, it fits the parameters of a space-time anomaly or portal. So in those cases, you're just driving along and you zip ahead or zip back, and I could see that happening. It can affect time itself too, so it's almost like a reset. Although in this case, it's not a time anomaly because you mentioned the gas. You did actually drive, you just were zipped back. Which is freaky indeed. I wonder what your GPS history data would show. That's an interesting thing to check. See if it shows that you just teleported back. That would be weird. Case notes are file 1056. Is this a sign from the universe in a crystal miracle? So this reminds me of that strange red ball, the story where there was just a random red ball in a mostly empty basement that was smooth, no other entrances, no reason for a red ball to appear in the basement area, but it just was there. There's no rational explanation that they could come up with. Kind of just like this. There's no reason for this quartz crystal to be in your home, but it was. I think it's far more of a fascinating glitch than just duplication or disappearance, because it's not supposed to be there at all. It's like the universe is not just mistakenly rendering or de-rendering an object, but losing track of who it even belongs to. So in a different universe, someone who does have the crystal probably lost it, or maybe even from this universe, because it is just not yours. So it could just have vanished and come to you for some reason. The universe all wonky. Definitely wonky. Case notes for the bonus file. Discovering the eerie secrets of a medieval Tudor hall. The more I read and think about spirit stories, the more my impression is that the vast bulk of these lingering fragments of sentience are just lonely. They're trying desperately to communicate or interact with us, but it's very difficult to do. They're sort of stuck in a limbo. The perpetual spectator of the game, unable to interact in any meaningful way with the living. The only hope for them is eventually their energy depletes and they fade away. It's only a small fragment anyways. The bulk of consciousness is transposed to a different universe via quantum immortality if they're dead. How much of it is still conscious, what is left behind? Is it just an imprint, almost like just executable code that doesn't have any sentience? Just operating along the lines of whoever was passed away, but not really self-aware. I hope it's the latter, because if not, it's kinda sad, isn't it? And now time for the quote of the day. If you look long enough and hard enough, you can find something to hate about anyone. However, the opposite is also true. Sort of like steel manning versus straw manning an opinion, but for an entire person. So you can try to view your, not opponents, the person you disagree with, his opinions, in either the best light possible, the steel man, or the worst light possible, the straw man, or just concoct an entirely different opinion or construct of what they actually believe. It's easier to attack something absurd that you make up about them, or about their worldview, rather than what they actually think. It's hard to square that, for sure. None of this is easy. These quotes of the day, I think, are meant to instill, thought processes in people, but don't mean that I'm perfect or anyone else is perfect. They're just thought experiments. And maybe they help you to improve yourself just a little bit here and there. A good way to start with that, indeed, is just to try to think the best of people, unless absolute evidence is provided that they aren't good people. Yeah, fair enough, I'd say. Case notes are file 1057. The mystery of the shapeshifting vacuum. So those tiny little anomalies that you can almost just brush off, almost, as a malfunction of your own mind and perception, they're what breaks the multiverse's proverbial camel's back. It's truly like the universe is gaslighting us. Intentionally or not, that's the real question. I think if it is intentional in these small cases, it's just as pranks. I don't think it's malicious. It doesn't seem harsh enough to be malicious. No, it's too much like what I would do. Case notes for the bonus file. When the wild turns against you, a hiker's nightmare. So I wonder if that man, the middle-aged man you met on the trail, was even real. For some reason, my impression is that he was wandering the path and didn't actually own a house. Maybe he did in the past, but it wasn't really his. If you had camped in that area, the actual real owner may have come out and asked, what are you doing? The guy you're talking about doesn't live or hasn't lived here for maybe decades or something. That'd be my guess. So yeah, just in a nutshell, I think it was a spirit that was lonely and looking for company on the trail, the only path that he knows and can travel. It is seriously sad in many ways to consider that spirits are just these entities that are trapped behind consciousness, pockets of consciousness that want to move on but can't, not yet. I think they will eventually. I think the energy dissipates, so it's not all bad. But in the meanwhile, they're probably just bored. I wonder if their perception of time is as linear as us, or at least as consistent. Every single second we experience. It's all time is relative in perception too. If you're having fun, it seems to go by much faster than if you're bored. So hopefully they're only aware of small pockets, and then eventually they just fade away. That'd be better. And now time for the quote of the day. Every man dies, but not every man really lives. William Wallace. Freedom! You have to draw your own lines in life. You can't be living by someone else's standards and principles. You have to know what actually makes sense to you. And then, to truly live, you have to embrace those values and be consistent with them. Not the easiest thing to do, but give it a shot. We all have to. Case notes for file 1058, crashing into the multiverse twice. So it is possible that the first event was a premonition, a kind of vision of what would come to pass. Though I'd have to side more with quantum immortality given how you describe the damage to your leg. Major arteries are within the leg, so near the thigh, even towards your calf area, there's major arteries, like highways for blood, that traverse there, and if it's severed, even internally, you'll just bleed out from inside. You may not even necessarily know anything is wrong, you'll just feel tired and eventually pass away. The fact it happened again, however, that's just wild. If you're in a new universe, remember, it's the same time coordinates relative to other universes, so it just means to say that everything is running concurrently, as we understand it. So if you traverse to a new universe in quantum immortality, you're still in the same date and time. Sometimes there's like tiny rewinds or fast forwards to square the circle, but this wouldn't relate to having an accident a few days later, 3 days later. So it seems like somehow in this other universe, it's quite different, and you had an accident that somehow played out. The amount of things that have to go wrong for an accident to happen. So if that is the case, you're just in a universe that is that different, then you should notice all kinds of weird anomalies all the time. Like, people's personalities are different. Maybe your friend is, maybe you have different friends. But, different paint colors on walls or just anomalies. The credit cards in your wallet are different. Even bank passwords. That's something that you don't think about a lot, but if you're in a new universe and the other you that was there may not have chosen the same password, so you're kind of out of luck in those cases, right? If you can't change the password. That would be annoying. Maybe sometimes when you think you forgot a password, you actually didn't. You're just remembering a different universe's password. Just a random thought there. Case notes for file 1059. From depression to joy. My Ayers rock encounter. What a moving and full experience this must have been for you. Just incredible. I know a lot of people feel down and depressed lately, especially in the recent years with everything that happened. I do wonder how people are picked for this kind of help. If it's willed external, like a guardian angel, spiritual, or just from the simulation, it's not random. So I have to think it's related to the person, but why would some people deserve, or is it even related to deserving? It's just something that has to happen for that person, for everything else to play out as it needs to. Maybe instead of that, maybe it's your own will screaming back into the past because you're in a negative future and you want to avoid that buffered reality, so you're choosing something different this time. And to do that, you have to scream back at your past. Almost like a spiritual ghostly echo screaming back, don't do it. But not in those words, just as a feeling instead. No, Dave? No. Don't do it, Dave. Case notes for the creepy file number 87. The Curious Case of the Blue SUV, a weird road trip story. So you may have been stuck in an entirely transient multiverse crossing point, which has a lot of symmetry with the rickety old bridge you had to cross over too, but I don't think that's necessarily related, although it's very weird that the accident happened crossing into the point where the river would cross over, and it's called, Rio de Mortes. That's a river of deaths. I guess it fits the name. The river's trying to live up to its reputation. You know what I kind of miss? Those road trips in the past where you had to use an actual map, like unfolding the giant map and figuring out where you are in relation to everything. Very old school, I guess, but yeah. It's better to have pocket GPS on your phone, much more practical, of course, but I don't know, I still miss it, finding your way. More of an adventure, it feels like, I think. You can still do it, I guess. And now time for the quote of the day. Life is not the amount of breaths you take, it's the moments that take your breath away. Alex Hitchens. Yeah, this reminds me of the oatmeal analogy, that life is like a bowl of oatmeal. Most of it is somewhat bland, it's still nutritional and important, but really you want those raisins. Or bananas if you had bananas like I do to oatmeal. Or those pockets of brown sugar or maple syrup. Those are the fun times. But to appreciate the fun times, you have to have the mundane times as well. Not necessarily negative, but, just a baseline. If your baseline is awesome all the time, I guess that's okay, but you won't appreciate it as much as if you have a baseline of just oatmeal. Case notes for the file 1060. When the universe helps you ace an exam. So was this information given to you by a higher level function of the universe itself, and then just decoded in your subconscious and then passed down to the conscious element via a voice in the head? That's how your brain interpreted and presented it to you, the conscious, you? Or is it some other entity present that knew you'd find an easy and guided answer if you just went with the first page? Why would they care? Was it some spirit that knew you? I think that's less likely. I think it's much more likely that the universe itself, or some higher level moderator, is probably the best word to use, wanted you to succeed. For whatever reason. I don't know what you were studying, but maybe it was important that you passed. That's my guess. So I'll swing with the former. Case notes for file 1061. The night I stepped into a different bathroom dimension. So I'll call this multiversal visitation. More than just peering, as you touched the wall in this parallel reality, you felt the differences, the cracks and all of that, and the lack of a nail. Is there a force that flows through the universe that when you cross it or interact with it, enables this kind of sightseeing or temporary crossover? And it was an actual crossover because you touched everything in the bathroom and used the bathroom itself. Thing is, it has to be bound with the planet itself. This force or portal, whatever you want to call it, because the planet is orbiting our sun, which is also orbiting the center of our galaxy, which itself is also in movement related to the local cluster, other galaxies, and so on. So, absolute movement, in terms of space-time coordinates, one to the next, we're moving so fast, and it's such an, predictable but crazy pattern. We're never in the same space-time coordinates ever again. And given that, whatever is affecting this has to be bound to us, to the planet. So it's bound by gravity, whatever it is, or it's literally implanted within the space-time fabric. The only other possibility is that these things are peppered all throughout the universe, and we're just crossing into them sometimes, and then they just happen to cross in that exact moment, in that thin little crust layer on the planet's surface where we are, and then that's how this happens. They must be everywhere, though, if that's the case, because space is insanely huge, as most people know now. Case notes for the creepy file number 88. A dog's intuition. How my Pomeranian detected a threat. So dogs, cats too, as much as I hate to admit it, do have a strong sense of a person. Is it just raw intuition on their part, or an ability to sense our aura, so to speak? And does our aura reflect our actions and intent? It's rather fascinating to think about, the notion that we're surrounded by an invisible field of energy that represents good and evil. Kind of like in Harry Potter, where the Death Eaters are all in black and the Order members are in white. So I think a bit on the nose in that, but along those lines, I guess. Also, I did work at a Humane Society kennel over a decade ago down in Florida the first time I went there. And let me tell you, those tiny little dogs, the Chihuahuas especially, they are the fiercest. I guess they have something to prove. And now time for the quote of the day. Nobody's gonna hit you as hard as life. But it ain't how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Perseverance. Rocky Balboa, of course. Love this quote. Love the movie. It's all about realizing that you're gonna get hit. You're gonna take damage. There's gonna be pain. But that's okay. No pain, no gain, as they say, right? So take the pain, get back up, dust yourself off, get knocked out again, and then just keep doing it until eventually you succeed, because you will eventually. Case notes are file 1062. I witnessed a cart teleport at 50 miles an hour. So I'm very curious exactly what the racer in the cart saw and felt. The distance wasn't so great that it's inexcusable from their perspective. They were moving so fast. For instance, they could just think, oh, so much adrenaline, my mind literally just didn't process a few seconds, and now I'm all the way up here. In a high-octane race like that, I could see it happening. Another case of space-time warping, but more curious, only affecting one racer. If it's location-dependent, why didn't all the other carts also experience the same thing? Just that one person crossing the space-time portal, but it only affected him, so it just vanished? Maybe they're unstable, and they vanish after. I guess that would be my guess, that they're unstable. If crossed once, then they vanish. Maybe a few times, I don't know. Case file number 1063. The mystery of the chocolate plaque that fell from the sky. So I can literally feel the excitement and energy from you in your writing. I love it. To be fair, I'd be excited as you if a random chocolate was falling from the sky. So was this some elaborate assassination plot by Allergy? Let's not go there. No. Just some sky wizardry. Universe wizardry producing inedible chocolate for you. A cruel torture. Case notes for the bonus file. My terrifying encounter with a shadow dog. So is this a trick of the mind? Shadow on the wall. Sounds more than just a hallucination. I'm reminded of another story where a woman had to let her dog inside too, just before going to bed. Yeah, I think, or waking? No, just because she wanted to go to bed. And then the dog also had a strange vibe about them after, though they never saw any sort of shadow. It just was odd. Was like it was an imposter dog. Is something possessing our pets? Can that even happen? I don't like that idea. Now time for the quote of the day. Some people can't believe in themselves until someone else believes in them first. Sean McGuire. It is hard to believe in yourself, especially with no baseline. If you haven't accomplished enough yet, or even if you have, but sometimes if you're just put down as a child, it can be hard to appreciate your own achievements and your potential. So someone else coming along and saying, yeah, you have potential, or you've done amazing things. Embrace it, and it's okay to take pride in what you've done. I think we diminish pride a bit too much. You don't want to go to hubris, which is just pride on steroids that's undeserved and arrogant. But pride, to be proud of what you've done, that is good. And you have to internalize it and take it with you. It's important. Like the video, subscribe. Kinetic Symphony signing off. Case notes are file 1064. The unexplained portal in my backyard. So I don't think you're nuts, although this is one of the more particular glitches I've seen. We all know about multiversal peering, but all the universes out there run concurrent to us, and they're within the same space-time coordinates. So that means that if you look into a different universe, it might be slightly different, but it's along the same timeline. So if somehow you're looking through the membrane into a parallel world, just like digging out snow somehow digging out the membrane, then you're seeing into a parallel world, you'd still just be seeing dirt because you're looking at the same space-time coordinates. The orientation would be the same, the vector would be the same as well. Unless somehow the planet itself shifted ever so slightly downward relative to the universe, even it doesn't matter in what timeline you're in, the gravity should function the same way. Well, there are theories actually that maybe physics, the laws of physics, differ slightly between parallel universes too. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Case file number 1065. The mystery of the old pink lady. The only thing I can think that would explain this ordinarily is other people over the years also inputted old pink lady by mistake in their GPS, and the map app that they used took them to that house every time for some reason. Maybe just because it has no information, it inputs a random house. But the same random house for everyone. So as a practical joke, the lady that lives there decides to prank people by dressing up in pink and sitting on the porch. The old pink lady. Just to mess with people that come by. It is rather far-fetched, but outside of that, I don't know what would cause this. Some kind of simulation prank? A higher level prank indeed. Case notes for the bonus file. A sinister gray fox? My experience in the deep woods. So this made me instantly think about the story where someone goes on vacation to a small town, in an isolated house surrounded by forests too. I forgot the area, maybe it was Michigan. Anyways, they too felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Like a blanket of evil was cast over the town. That ended as soon as they left, the emotion just vanished like a weight taken off of them. I think there are places in the world where evil congregates. It seems to be natural order of nature that power accumulates, good and bad. And now time for the quote of the day. It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. Tyler Durden. Fight Club. Classic movie. Slightly misunderstood. I think the entire thing was playing in his mind. Nothing of that was really happening. It's a defense mechanism. And I think the story is meant not as like this grand scream against the system, but more about longing for something more. And I think we all feel that way, right? It's perfectly natural. You can find it, you just have to find yourself, and that's the real key. Maybe you do want to be a boxer or a fighter. I don't know. Give it a shot. Join a gym and try it out. Maybe I will. Case notes for file 1066. The Twilight Zone on the L train? 3 stops at First Avenue? Yeah, this is just wild. There's another story I read, somewhat recently, involving a train repeating a station too, but only once. And if I recall, the person never asked anyone if they saw anything odd. They were a bit too shy, more shy than you, I guess, to ask. But no one reacted as if the stop repeated. People can be lost in their minds for sure, even in 2012. Most people would have podcasts in, music, etc. I could see people missing it once. But to repeat the same station twice is baffling. You definitely notice that, even if you're caught in your music. Case notes are file 1067. My art creations vanish from the internet. So the obvious suspect is quantum immortality. And you do have the images still in your gallery. It's just from any place you uploaded them, or created them, they're not there, saved anywhere. People do remember also that you showed them the images before, but you say vaguely. So maybe it is in a different universe where somehow you just never used any of those apps and never saved them. The people you showed maybe was from a while back, and so they only vaguely remember it. But it does strike me as quantum immortality. I can't think of anything else. What kind of glitch would cause images to just not be there anywhere from one site maybe, but not from multiple plus offline apps? I don't know of a glitch that would cause that unless it's deliberate intervention from the server developers, but why would they want to do that? I don't think they want to suppress your art that much. You know, the suppressed artist? I don't think that's the case. Case notes for file 1068. How my dream helped me cheat death. So I think your dream was your mind accessing hidden information from at least one buffered universe, maybe just this one, but I think they're pooled together. It's all out there. We just can't decode it. I think dreaming is, in part, that. The process of understanding that information. Yes, we sleep to repair our bodies, organize our own memories of the day, but I think it's even more than that. There's a reason some of the brightest minds come up with brilliant ideas while they're sleeping, or just after waking up. The mind is super active when we're in REM sleep stages. I think trying to peer beyond our basic senses and access the full breadth of knowledge out there. It's pretty awesome. Of course, I never remember my dreams, so my subconscious is just saying, you know, that would be too easy. I'm not going to give you that information, so go without it. So unfair. And now time for the quote of the day. It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices. Dumbledore. Harry Potter. My childhood in a nutshell. And gave me justification for being the rebel that never obeyed the rules. Never did anything bad, not truly bad, just being, you know, the rebel without a cause as a teenager. Can you see me as that? Probably most can't. They see me as a goody two-shoes, right? We won't speak of it. But yes, I agree with the Great Wizard. Case notes are file 1069. Perfume and Time Warp. My journey into the past. So I believe the vision you had was of a real time and place. It may have been even a memory from your childhood. You weren't physically there, your mind went back, connected to your soul. This reminds me of that scene in the Mummy movie where Eve is sent back in time by her perspective. but it's really just memories of past lives, maybe even genetic, maybe related to a specific place and decoded by our brains. The knowledge was already there. You were just interacting with it, something prompted it, standing up in the way you did, moving towards the box TV because it was old. Maybe that connected your mind to that memory, or a memory of a different person that was there, even in a different parallel universe. There's so many different copies of us meandering about in different parallel worlds. There's a lot of information and a lot of replays, you could say, to be accessed. Case notes are file 1070. Razorhead's gone rogue. Right, so this is classic DOP, but I think it proves a theory I've had for a while. Even ghosts need to shave. No, but really, do they? I don't think so. But maybe they do. I mean, if you're an echo of the human body, you're just a soul. That soul, you're manifesting a body, a physical form. Now, it's not matter as we understand it, energy that's bound by the Higgs boson, compressed energy. And so the physical processes don't have to happen like hair growing out, all this lovely matted fur. You don't have to shave it off or off your body if you're a ghost. Unless, maybe some spirits don't realize they're spirit. If they're obsessed with their appearance, they may still want to take care of it. Just a theory, unless it's just the universe randomly taking your razors for some reason. But it seems more willed for that, because that's a lot of razors to go through. And now time for the quote of the day. No one will love you if you don't love yourself first. Don't need to add too much to this one. That's just to say that if you don't love yourself, then why would you expect anyone else to? It's the hardest thing in the world to evaluate yourself and all the mistakes you've had, the regrets you carry with you, and still think, I deserve love, and I'm gonna love myself first. That's the first step, the first person. Case notes are file 1071. Mystery of the Airport Cafe. Uniforms appear out of thin air. So the suggestion of them wearing an overcoat, sweaters or so, and having their uniform underneath that, maybe. But I figured you'd have mentioned that it was a possibility. You would have noticed that they originally were wearing uniforms like that, or not uniforms. They were originally wearing sweaters or overcoats or something to cover up their uniforms. And you'd have noticed those clothing items draped over the chairs or on the table if that was the case, if they had removed them. So the only info we truly have is that they didn't react as if their outfits morphed. So by their understanding, their perspective, they were always wearing those uniforms when they went into the cafe. Was it just your own perception that altered? I've heard of people projecting from what they read into the real world, so you were doing some assignment. Maybe you were reading something related to uniforms. It's how mentalists manipulate our choices. It's like guessing what color you're thinking of by priming you in the color of the rug or the tablecloth or what they're wearing, that kind of trick. You can set your mind along a certain path, or the mind of someone else, and in this case it could be accidental manipulation. Outside of that, it could just be a different universe peering. So you just saw them in your original universe or in a either or. Was the original... Oh. I just realized I forgot Dave. I'm so terrible. In the previous video too. Oh my goodness. Anyways, sorry Dave. Probably accidental manipulation or universal glitchery. Case notes are file 1072. The case of the disappearing makeup brush heads. So as established prior in yesterday's video, we know that ghosts need to groom themselves, or maybe they want to, even though they don't need to. So they detach personal grooming items from our dimensional realm, phase them over there, take care of business, and then when they're done, if they're nice, they return them to us. Maybe. It seems like if it's not ghosts, it's some other dimensional aliens, because the items that are going missing are pretty specific in these cases. For toiletries and so on. It doesn't seem random in the objects selected. Case notes are the creepy file number 89. Eerie apartments, wax in the night. So I've seen a few comedy skits on Instagram Reels of people acting like the upstairs neighbors that everyone has, apparently. And I think we can all agree something weird is going on there. It's like somehow, during all hours of the day and night, it sounds like upstairs neighbors are holding a party, executing a demonic ritual while cooking and vacuuming up their mess and somehow dancing and I don't know. It's the same thing for me when I lived in an apartment. Somehow, upstairs, and I think there was one apartment where I lived which was on the highest floor. It wasn't a large building, but it was like 4 floors to the top of the floor. Somehow, the downstairs neighbors, in that case, were noisy. It's like it's destined. No matter what apartment you're in, even if you're in the top floor, you're going to be bothered by weird noise. It's like, is it the actual tenants, or is it just spirits that are messing with us? Or are we hearing sounds multiplied from various parallel realities because of the lack of observation? There's always noise, that's for sure. And now time for the quote of the day. What's your first thought every morning after waking up? A quote and question, one that never fails to enter my mind. What's for breakfast? Today was pancakes. Maple syrup, pure. Not the pancake syrup nonsense, no. Has to be real maple syrup. Case notes are file 1073. The day I stopped a faucet with my mind. Okay, if I saw someone telekinetically turn off a faucet, I too would turn pale. And then with extraordinary enthusiasm and excitement, I'd ask them to do it again and teach me their powers. I've thought a lot about telekinesis before. Of course, it shows up in science fiction and Star Trek and Stargate all the time, often as a function of higher level intelligence, like your brain is evolving to a certain point where you're using enough of it to start moving things with your mind. Of course, that's nonsense. We use all of our brains. Every part of it has a function. We don't use it all the time at the same time, but that wouldn't make any sense, like running a graphics processing unit on a computer when you're not doing anything that would need it. So we use all of our brains just for different functions, lead towards a mind being able to influence the world in that way. What is the mechanism exactly? Can our mind somehow access the inner code of the simulation, like Neo in the Matrix? Even when he goes into the real world, he's able to manipulate the machines that are coming after the vessel at the end of the second movie, I believe. How does he do that? Well, a lot of speculation. People think that he's still connected to the network that they function on, the Wi-Fi network, basically. Maybe something like that. Maybe there's a actual soul connection to the real world, and then via that, you can manipulate things in this simulation. I don't know what else could. There's no direct link otherwise. Case notes are file 1074. Did my dream predict the future, or unveil another dimension? So describing a loss of executive functioning is wildly fascinating. Along for the ride or on the buffered reality track, unable to alter the replay, so to speak. Something like that. Or maybe it was a shock of adrenaline from realizing you had precognitive event capability, and reality is far more incredible than you actually knew before this. Either way, your mind was able to access information that, by our standard reasoning, it shouldn't have, which is just incredible. What other word is there? Okay, I got Dave back, don't worry. Don't freak out. I get everything set up to record, and then Dave is on the top of my computer on the side, and then I just focus on recording my notes, and then I forget Dave is right there. But he's back, okay? Case notes are file 1075. My mom tried on a dress, but she didn't? So given how small the store was, it's impossible to have mistaken your mom for some other girl who then vanished from the changing room, because again, there was no other girl in there, not even an employee by your description. So was your mom messing with you? Is that a prank? Possibly. Or maybe she needed that green dress, the universe decreed, and it'll play an integral role in her life. An important work meeting perhaps, and it'll impress her boss, and then she gets a promotion, and then you get funding for college or something along, all the dominoes that have to align just right. So never underestimate the small details. That's where the devil is, and the deciding factor in our lives in many occasions. The big stuff is too easy. Case notes for file 1076. Arcade dreams and déjà vu. Yeah, to me this is absolute evidence of buffered reality. I can't square how to explain it otherwise. I mean, your mind, while dreaming, which I think is often the key to decoding this information, understood what will happen later on in time. Thing is, it still happened even though you knew about it. That's only possible if our experience of reality lacks free will in the visual input, the direct moment to moment. But I think that's surface level. I think we have free will, but we already made our choices and now we're just reliving it. We're watching a movie of the choices we had made. But we're experiencing it as if we have direct control right now, but we're just watching a replay. Now maybe there are times where we can resume from replay. If you play games, you understand that, where you can have a replay of your match in that game, and then you can resume from a specific given moment, and then just rewatch the replay after that from those actions you take then. So when I'm playing a match of Overwatch, I make all my choices along the match, which ultimately culminates to a win or a loss. And after the match, I can load back into the replay and examine exactly what I did every moment, and from other people's points of view as well. Living as if in that moment, but while watching the replay, I don't have free will. I'm watching what my free will executed. It's kind of coherent. I don't know if it's true, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And now time for the quote of the day. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. In these times, I think it's an important quote. I think we all need to stand true to what we believe in. I'm someone who believes in freedom greatly. I won't go into politics. I just think we need to be able to speak our mind freely. That's all. If we can't speak to each other, then eventually swords come out. We don't want that. Definitely not. And like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.